The girl was set up by her superior and even became a sacrifice to be assassinated. But this was just the beginning. She unexpectedly reincarnated into a novel's world, becoming a noble princess. Yet she still couldn't escape the tragic fate of being poisoned by her brother and lover. A white-collar girl who had just been assassinated woke up to find herself in a royal palace chamber. Had she traveled through time? The appearance of a maid confirmed that she had become Princess Kaina from the novel. But why was she unconscious? At this moment, the maid told her she had just recovered from poison and still looked quite pale. Kaina was very confused about who had poisoned her. Suddenly, her memories began to rewind. At the palace banquet, after drinking the red wine given by Prince Rizef, she collapsed and lost consciousness. Perhaps her reincarnation was related to this poisoning incident. Recalling the novel, she had captivated everyone with her stunning beauty. But in the end, she was just a plaything in Rizef's eyes. A cold smile suddenly appeared at the corner of her mouth. This time, she would not repeat the same mistakes. With the knowledge from her previous life, plus Kaina's existing memories, she must take control of her own destiny. Fortunately, her timing of reincarnation was just right. Her father, the emperor, was still alive, so she could still use the throne to restrain Rizef. But she must leave this terrifying palace before Rizef ascends to the throne. Most importantly, she must be careful in choosing her lover. If she encounters another psychopath, she will be completely doomed. Just then, Rizef suddenly came to visit. Kaina secretly laughed. This half-brother of hers, though possessing an angelic appearance, had a devil's heart. In the future, he would kill his father with his own hands to ascend the bloody throne. Never loved by the emperor since childhood, it led to his extremely twisted and perverted personality. This was exactly what Kaina could exploit. His purpose for coming here, nominally to check on Kaina's health, was actually to see how much longer Kaina would live. Upon learning that Kaina had recovered, he was visibly displeased. Combined with Kaina's cold attitude, it made Rizef feel even more afraid. His former hot-tempered, transparent sister now gave him an unsettling sense of crisis. Nevertheless, he still hypocritically embraced Kaina, vowing to catch the culprit. Watching his fake behavior only made Kaina feel sick to her stomach. It seemed she was right. In Rizef's eyes, she was just a pawn to be manipulated at will. She suddenly pushed Rizef away and told him there was no need to catch the culprit. Rizef instantly flew into a rage. Why? That person almost killed you. Kaina smiled, thinking, wasn't it you who poisoned me, my dear brother? But her reason for refusing to investigate the culprit was also her first step in breaking free from Rizef's control. Rizef had planned to use the opportunity of helping Kaina investigate to frame the Kedri family and weaken their power. But Rizef was too naive. The Kedri family could easily modify the black market poison purchase records, and Rizef's plan would fall apart. The worst outcome would be that Rizef himself would face their retaliation. Seeing Rizef's hesitation, she suddenly grabbed his hand tightly and gently suggested, why not turn hostility into friendship and make the Kedri family allies? The opportunity for cooperation would be to invite Miss Olivia, whom the Kedri family favored, to serve as her lady-in-waiting in the palace. Kaina's words shocked him completely. How did the former arrogant, shallow princess suddenly possess such cunning? What puzzled him even more was that Olivia had always been Kaina's love rival. Why would she want to arrange for such a woman to be by her side? Of course, Kaina had her own considerations, as only she knew the novel's plot. Olivia was the true female protagonist and would become Rizef's most beloved woman in the future. Controlling Olivia would be equivalent to controlling Rizef. Rizef suddenly shouted, what are you trying to do? However, Kaina remained unperturbed. Instead, she knelt on one knee and gently kissed his fingers. My dear prince, I only have you. Rizef's rage slowly turned to terror, remembering how the former Kaina had said the same words to him. But this time, Kaina gave him an utterly unfamiliar and horrifying feeling. He frantically shook off Kaina's hand, demanding to know what Kaina was trying to do. Kaina didn't answer directly, but instead questioned him. Do you really see me as your sister? Perhaps after I'm no longer useful, you'll use me as a tool for political marriage. Kaina clearly remembered that it was because of Rizef that she married that super psychopath and was ultimately tortured to death. Then she stared seriously at Rizef with her jewel-like eyes. She had only one wish. She wanted to be free from anyone's control, to have her own life and possess the most precious freedom. Rizef laughed, his laughter full of contempt and mockery. Can you give up your luxury and wealth? Kaina could give up everything for freedom. However, before achieving her freedom, she would use actions to make Rizef trust her, and ultimately help him successfully ascend to the throne. Just as Rizef was about to ask her what she meant, Kaina collapsed into his arms due to dizziness. At this moment, he clearly felt Kaina's burning body, and for the first time, he truly worried about his sister, hurriedly calling for the royal physician. However, Kaina used her last strength to gently caress his cheek, saying, Rizef, you're such a kind child. Then she completely lost consciousness, and Rizef's heart was thoroughly moved. His sister was as beautiful as an angel. Kaina's efforts had not been in vain. Rizef followed her suggestion and randomly pinned the poisoning blame on a powerless noble. But Kaina's transformation simultaneously made him deeply uneasy. From this point on, he ordered his subordinates to monitor Kaina more closely, wanting to know her every move. At this time, his subordinates were surprised to find that Rizef showed signs of distraction for the first time. It seemed Kaina's transformation had greatly impacted him. If Kaina had ulterior motives, then he would have two powerful opponents in inheriting the throne. Besides Kaina, there was also the emperor's illegitimate son, Isda. This man was a dangerous psychopath, who had even taken the emperor's concubine hostage to gain inheritance rights. Therefore, he needed to further confirm Kaina's true intentions. If she could really help, his chances of inheriting the throne would be much higher. Meanwhile, after half a month of recovery, Kaina's body finally returned to normal. She did this partly to deceive Rizef and make him lower his guard. On the other hand, she was also waiting for the opportunity to change her destiny. Her coming-of-age ceremony was approaching, after which she would have to decide on her fiancé. In her previous life, she had unhesitatingly chosen Kedri, thus angering her father's arrangements, as the Kedri family held military power and was always at odds with the emperor. This time, to achieve her reversal of fortune, she first needed to regain her father's favor. But gaining her father's favor alone wasn't enough to achieve all this preparation for her freedom. To avoid being manipulated by anyone, she must have her own power base. And her next target was Bella, the maid from a commoner background. She was clever, sharp, and ambitious. Only someone like her could earn Kaina's respect. Dressed in luxurious attire, she went to pay respects to her father in his chambers. The ill emperor looked at her with disdain, mockingly remarking that it was rare for her to visit him. Kaina's emotions showed no fluctuation. After all, her past reckless behavior had already broken her father's heart. She decided to change from this moment on, first gracefully curtsying to her father, softly telling him that Rizef had caught the poisoner, so he needn't worry anymore. Actually, the emperor knew very well that the poisoner was Rizef, but he still probed Kaina, asking if she wanted help catching the real culprit. Unexpectedly, Kaina said this wasn't a big deal and didn't need the emperor to trouble himself. She needed to learn to consider the bigger picture. As she spoke, she held the emperor's hand, persuading him that Rizef was young and didn't know better, so don't blame him too much. The emperor's eyes instantly lit up. He hadn't expected his formerly frivolous daughter to know it was her brother who poisoned her, yet still protected him for the sake of the bigger picture. The emperor instantly let out a hearty laugh, saying, "Now this is my good daughter." Seeing Kaina so sensible, he granted her permission to freely choose her husband. The emperor had thought she would choose Kedri, but Kaina expressed that she would follow her father's arrangements. As long as her father was happy, she was happy. The emperor was stunned, asking wasn't she always in love with Kedri? Kaina gently replied that she had grown up and could no longer act on emotions alone. Kaina saw through it clearly. Kedri wouldn't love her anyway, and what she needed was simply power. This would instead make her father trust her more. The emperor expressed satisfaction, saying that a princess's choice of husband couldn't be casual. He would carefully help Kaina choose. Hearing this, Kaina politely took her leave. However, unexpectedly, just as she stepped out the door, she bumped right into Kedri. It turned out he had also come to pay respects to the emperor. He politely bowed to Kaina, but his eyes were full of contempt. His prestigious family background and strong military power made him look down on everyone. Even Kaina couldn't help feeling moved when she saw him. But this time, Kaina wouldn't be played by him again, instead coldly saying, "Lord Kedri, hello." Usually, Kaina would call him directly by name, and this sudden change surprised Kedri. But what surprised him even more was that, when Kaina walked near him, she unhurriedly said, "I know your purpose in seeing the emperor. Perhaps I can help you achieve your wish. Why not have a drink together?" Kedri was extremely shocked. He curiously asked how she knew he was worried about marriage matters. Kaina smiled and explained that it was actually very simple. Kedri was the heir to the empire's highest military family, but to successfully inherit the title, he must gain the approval of family retainers, and the simplest effective method was marriage. Of course, since Kaina held the complete script, knowing Kedri's thoughts was quite easy. However, Kedri planned to skip all this and get direct authorization from the emperor to inherit the title. Yet the emperor wouldn't see him. Now, Kaina knew his entire destiny. To handle this man, helping him smoothly inherit the title was the most effective method. But although he found Kaina unfathomable, could she really easily help him resolve his marriage troubles? Unexpectedly, Kaina wasn't in a hurry. Instead, she first asked the maid to serve milk tea, something commonplace in modern society, but unheard of in this era. Seeing Kedri's confused expression, Kaina couldn't help but smile, explaining it was a special beverage that could relieve hunger with just one cup. Kedri picked it up half believing, thinking at worst it would taste bad. He just needed to endure without spitting it out. Who knew he would instantly be conquered by the milk tea's smooth and sweet taste, as if his soul had been cleansed. cleansed. He then asked for a second cup, unable to control his inner desire. This was the first time in his life he had experienced something he liked. Kaina very thoughtfully told him the recipe, then began their afternoon of secret talks. When Kedri returned home, his mother suddenly returned from out of town. His mother used the excuse that his house was in disarray. It was time to help him choose a mistress. Then displayed the portraits of 3 candidate wives before Kedri. What shocked Kedri greatly was that when Kaina had helped analyze earlier, he had some doubts, but didn't expect her predictions to be so accurate. His mother's first 2 choices for potential brides were both rejected by Kaina. Even with the most beautiful appearance, without considerable knowledge, they couldn't help Kedri. Kaina strongly recommended Olivia, only she could give Kedri the greatest help. Meanwhile, Kaina specifically instructed that if they married successfully, don't forget her as the greatest matchmaker. But Kedri's heart was full of questions. How did Kaina know everything about him so well? He was very puzzled. Kaina couldn't have discussed this with his mother beforehand. He now had a feeling of being sold out by Kaina. But after thinking it over, he still couldn't marry. He had a very strong mental obsession with cleanliness. If he had to whisper words of love in a lover's ear or caress their face, he'd rather kill himself. So he refused his mother's proposal. Perhaps he hadn't even noticed himself since meeting Kaina this time and tasting the milk tea she prepared. Kaina's image remained constantly in his mind. He urgently wanted to see Kaina again. Meanwhile, in Kaina's palace, a group of maids were chatting and laughing. They ate the desserts Kaina provided, yet still dared to mockingly criticize Kaina. Bella, watching from the side, couldn't stand it and scolded their disrespect. But a maid in red clothing arrogantly talked back to Bella. Princess Kaina wasn't even angry, yet she, a mere maid, dared to be so imposing. They were all daughters of nobles. Serving here as maids was all under Prince Rizef's assignment. Nominally to care for Kaina, but actually to monitor her. No matter how outrageous they behaved, Rizef would back them up. Even if Rizef was a psychopath, they didn't care. They even hoped to become royal consorts and gain more power. Bella angrily clenched her fists. She was truly foolish to have stupidly wanted to join these people before. She just wanted to find a master who could prove her worth. Rizef, that psychopath, obviously wouldn't be the one. Those stupid women vainly tried to use beauty and emotions to make Rizef favor them. It was like dancing with death. The only person worthy of Bella's loyalty was Kaina. Of course, Kaina hadn't just won over Bella alone. She wanted to completely escape this cruel palace, but having just Bella wasn't enough. Earlier, she had put Kedri's marriage on the agenda, believing she would soon meet Olivia. That was the novel's true female protagonist. If she wanted to thoroughly gain Kedri's support, she must turn Olivia into an ally. For this, she began arranging the next steps. But unexpectedly, at this time her brother Rizef suddenly went mad and was slashing people with his sword everywhere. Kaina came to Rizef's chambers with strong authority, angrily shouting at the servants, "Hurry and clean up the room, what if Prince Rizef gets hurt?" But Rizef warned her not to come near. Yet Kaina still walked towards him. Rizef was extremely angry at this moment, truly afraid he might kill her in his rage. But when Kaina's hand touched his cheek, his fury instantly calmed. Kaina gently told him, "Don't be afraid, I'm always by your side." Then she used her hand to wipe his wounds. Rizef looked at her in disbelief. His sister was always so gentle. At this moment, he could no longer control his love for his sister. Then tightly embraced her in his arms, telling Kaina he was no longer the child from before. He didn't need her to comfort him. But Kaina still showed a warm smile. "Are you feeling better now?" Faced with Kaina's concern, Rizef finally admitted he felt much better. In the entire empire, only she could tame this wild beast Rizef. After she finished bandaging Rizef apologetically explained that it was all because his subordinates had defected to Harleon, making his claim to the throne face an even greater threat. Looking at her brother before her, Kaina thought helplessly that Rizef was just a wounded child. His twisted, perverted personality came from lacking love since childhood, and now only this sister remained by his side. Kaina decided to completely transform him with love, providing more help for her own absolute freedom. She gently stroked Rizef's golden hair, softly promising him that many nobles would attend her coming-of-age ceremony, and father had agreed to let her choose her own husband. At that time, many would come to propose. Hoping to control this foolish princess, Kaina decided to feign illness at the ceremony, letting Rizef handle the reception. This way, Rizef could bring them under his command, greatly increasing his power. Rizef instantly became excited. He could finally defeat Harleon, but this would sacrifice his sister's marriage. He worriedly asked Kaina, "What about Duke Kedri?" Kaina calmly stated, perhaps she had loved Kedri before, but who could guarantee love would never change? What was a small sacrifice compared to helping Rizef? News that the princess had decided to give up marrying Kedri spread throughout noble circles. Kedri, unwilling to accept this, sought audience with Princess Kaina 5 times, but was rejected each time with illness as the excuse. Rather than Kedri, Kaina was more concerned about her brother Rizef. Learning he had met with Earl General Albert, Kaina was very pleased. That man owned sapphire mines and could surely provide huge help to Rizef. Since Rizef had followed her advice as his sister, she naturally should reward him. So she decided to cook personally, to make some snacks for Rizef. The maids thought she was joking, but seeing Kaina's excellent culinary skills, both maids and cooks were instantly stunned. They never dreamed the noble princess could be so talented. They would never guess that in her previous life she often cooked, and her mother was a top pastry chef. This small task couldn't stump her. What surprised them more was that Kaina actually made 2 portions. One for Rizef, one to reward these kind servants. The cook was instantly moved to tears. Then Kaina asked who would take the snacks to Rizef. The maids nearby instantly went crazy, all eagerly wanting to compete for Rizef's favor. If they could become royal consort, it would be like ascending to heaven in one step. Suddenly, a noble maid snatched the snacks, preparing to serve them to Rizef, but she was instantly burned and dropped them. The hot snacks directly hit Kaina's arm. The maid hurriedly knelt and begged forgiveness. Unexpectedly, Kaina wasn't angry at all. Bella beside her was confused, asking Kaina why she was so kind. Who knew Kaina would suddenly change expression, saying with a sinister tone, "Do you think I'm really that kind? You'll take the snacks, you know what to do, right?" Bella naturally understood Kaina's intention. When Rizef tasted the delicious snacks, his heart instantly bloomed with joy. His sister actually cared for him so much he felt truly blessed. Just as he was happily enjoying the snacks, Bella casually mentioned that the princess had just been injured. The next second, Rizef directly charged into the princess's residence with soldiers. He stared at these formerly arrogant maids like a demon descending. They were originally his people sent to monitor Kaina, yet unexpectedly enjoyed better treatment than Kaina and even dared to burn the princess. His anger instantly reached its peak. He said he would cut off the maid's arm. But just then, Kaina, like an angel descending, gently held his arm, kindly persuading him not to do this. But Rizef warned her to stay away. Yet despite his fury, Kaina was like a gentle breeze that soothed his rage. With angelic tenderness, she whispered, "The maid meant no harm." She smiled at her brother. "You look scary when you're angry." Rizef came back to his senses, realizing he had frightened his sister. But Kaina remained unfazed. This panicked, helpless Rizef finally reminded her of that weak, helpless little brother who needed her love years ago. He had once needed her protection so desperately. Even though in her past life, Rizef had used her as a tool and ruthlessly killed her after she served her purpose, Kaina still firmly believed that if she could care for Rizef properly, give him selfless love, he would surely change for her. Indeed, it happened exactly as Kaina had thought. His actions just now to punish the maid for Kaina were his special way of showing concern for his sister. After resolving the trouble, Rizef suddenly reverted to his childhood self, spoiled as he asked Kaina for more snacks. It seemed the earlier treats had awakened his appetite. He praised that his sister's snacks were 1,000,000 times better than the royal chef's. Kaina laughed softly, saying she would make them for him even without his flattery. Looking at the cute and playful Rizef, she couldn't help stroking his golden hair again. Rizef's eyes instantly widened. What was this electric warmth? Since childhood, he had achieved so many merits for the royal family, yet even his father had never given him any praise. But right now, no reward could compare to his sister's gentleness. Just being by his sister's side made him the happiest person in the world. Finally, he completely let down his guard, no longer seeing his sister as a tool, but as his only trustworthy support. News of Kaina calming Rizef quickly spread throughout the palace. Everyone praised Kaina endlessly. Only Rizef's advisor was very worried. He had stayed by Rizef's side because he thought he could control this raging bull. But Kaina's transformation had given him a great sense of crisis. He decided to be more wary of Kaina from now on. What Kaina hadn't expected was that the news also reached her father's ears. Kaina took this opportunity to gain her father's absolute trust. When the emperor learned of Kaina's injury, he caringly asked if she was better. Kaina told her father she was much better, thanks to Rizef helping apply medicine. The emperor was pleased she had handled her troublesome brother, but criticized her for being too kind. Dealing with a maid of common noble birth was necessary to maintain the princess's authority. But Kaina said the maid hadn't meant harm. Actually, Kaina understood this was also her father testing her. If she had really executed the maid, that would have displeased her father instead. The emperor told Kaina that a good subordinate could help handle many matters. Originally, Kaina had wanted to replace those maids who monitored her, and with her father bringing up this topic, Kaina could make her request without arousing her father's suspicion. Using the excuse that her jewelry and clothes were too outdated to keep up with current trends, she hoped to find several maids familiar with capital fashion to help handle her daily work. She aimed to create an image of a simple, sweet princess before her father. This way would make the emperor see her as unthreatening and instead love this daughter even more. Suddenly, the steward beside them brought up that Kaina's coming-of-age ceremony was approaching, yet she had no elder female companion by her side. The emperor felt guilty upon hearing this. As a father, he had neglected such an important matter. So he asked Kaina if she had any suitable candidates in mind. Kaina's choice was naturally Colorado, her mother's childhood friend and also her wet nurse. But she decided to take a step back, making the excuse that perhaps no one would want to be her companion. Moreover, randomly finding someone without knowing their background wouldn't be wise. Seeing this, the emperor took the initiative to suggest bringing back Colorado, who had been expelled from the palace. This way she could help manage Kaina's daily life. This was probably Kaina's happiest moment. Since her mother's departure, Kolo had been the only one who took care of her in the palace. She was genuinely happy about their upcoming reunion. After handling these matters, she left the emperor's chamber. But just as she walked out the door, she ran into the man who gave her headaches, Duke Kedri. She thought he was here to see the emperor. But even after Kaina rejected him 5 times, Kedri was willing to wait outside the emperor's door just to see her. What surprised her even more was that, to thank her for the milk tea last time, Kedri had bought an expensive red tea from the auction house, which was said to be so rare that even the emperor couldn't easily get it. What could this man's intentions be? Kaina politely smiled and thanked him for the gift. "It seems my help was quite useful to you. Why don't we take a walk together?" Kedri held Kaina's wrist, expressing his great honor. But Kaina withdrew her hand, suggesting they shouldn't be too intimate. Upon reaching the garden, Kaina teased, asking if Kedri wasn't afraid of being pursued by her again. Kedri awkwardly stated that he believed the princess wouldn't do that anymore. Kaina was quite satisfied with his answer. It seemed her previous help to Kedri had been effective. She was glad that Kedri approved of the marriage candidate she helped him choose, and soon all those backup noble families would decline. The only one who would be chosen would be Olivia, who would soon come to the palace as Kaina's maid. The Kedri family had always been at odds with the royal family, and they would no longer support Olivia. This way, all of Kedri's marriage candidates would be eliminated. At that point, Kedri's mother would no longer be able to control him through marriage. This way, Kedri could temporarily escape his troubles. Kaina's analysis left Kedri greatly shocked. He hadn't expected that Kaina had predicted everything. He mustered the courage to ask Kaina why she was trying so hard to help him, and why she actively arranged his meeting with Olivia when Kaina should hate Olivia. To his surprise, Kaina calmly said that all those past resentments and jealousies were gone, and love was no longer important to her. Kedri's eyes widened. He really hadn't expected Kaina to think this way. What shocked him even more was that Kaina took the initiative to graciously apologize for her past actions. Kaina even swore in her name as princess that she would never act disrespectfully towards him again. Kedri was utterly surprised. He really couldn't understand what Kaina's intentions were. What could she hope to gain by swearing such an oath? Kaina told him with complete sincerity that she only wanted to gain Kedri's trust. Kedri was stunned. Was that really all? Kaina added that when she had previously shared intelligence with Kedri, it was just to prove to him that she was a capable strategist. This was Kaina's way of doing things. But Kedri wasn't a fool. He immediately understood that Kaina needed him. And at the same time, she was testing whether he could be trusted. Yet Kedri still couldn't understand why Kaina would go to such lengths. Was it really just to help Rezef become emperor? But he quickly dismissed this thought. Rather than choosing the Kedri family, which was at odds with the royal family, it would make more sense to ally with other families to help Rezef ascend to the throne. At this moment, Kaina extended an olive branch. If this had happened before, Kedri would have certainly cursed this woman to her face. But things were different now, looking at Kaina's angelic face and her commanding presence. Kedri bowed deeply, saying he was willing to trust Kaina. Having received his affirmative answer, Kaina smiled with satisfaction. She suggested they leave quickly as rumors would be troublesome. But just as she turned to leave, she suddenly slipped and fell. Kedri quickly caught her in his arms. This intimate contact with Kedri again. Even the usually ice-cold Kaina felt her heart racing, and she instantly became shy. But she quickly pushed him away. She awkwardly explained that she was fine, though internally she deeply regretted her mistake. Kedri had an obsessive germophobia and hated physical contact with others. Kaina had worked so hard to finally gain his trust, she couldn't let it all go to waste over this. She urged them to leave quickly. But Kedri stood frozen in place. He noticed that from the beginning, Kaina had been avoiding physical contact with him. The secret of his germophobia was known only to himself. Could it be that Kaina had been hiding herself from the start? Kaina gave him the feeling as if she had lived several lifetimes. But as soon as this thought occurred to him, he immediately dismissed it. How could such an absurd thing be possible? So he made a bold decision. Seeing that the path was uneven, and Kaina could easily fall in her high heels, Kedri took the initiative to hold Kaina's hand, saying, "Please bear with it until we reach the end of this path." Kaina was stunned. Shouldn't Kedri be the uncomfortable one? What had gotten into him? And so they walked hand in hand until they reached the entrance. But when the maid appeared, they deliberately maintained their distance. Though this distance was dramatically exaggerated, they had seemed quite close earlier when going to the garden. Just then, Kaina suddenly dismissed him. Kedri had originally wanted to spend the whole day with her. But seeing that Kaina wanted to send him away, Kedri smiled. Then he suddenly knelt on one knee before Kaina. Gently holding Kaina's hand, Kaina felt very awkward and wanted to refuse. But Kedri said it was his honor and then kissed her hand. For Kedri, being able to touch Kaina's skin with his lips was his greatest honor. Kedri wondered to himself, was it because the princess no longer pursued him that he had become curious? He just hadn't expected the princess to be such a resilient person. Whatever the case, the current Kaina attracted him deeply with her every gesture. Then he rose and bid farewell to Kaina. Just then, Rizef suddenly arrived at the room. He spoke arrogantly, saying, "Sister, I've been looking for you for a long time," then glanced at Kedri beside her, giving a contemptuous greeting. Kedri politely bowed to the prince. Rizef said he had come to have tea with Kaina. But Kaina clearly felt that Rizef had come deliberately after hearing about Kedri's visit. Although Rizef had gained the support of Marquis Mevins, known as the Granary, his competitor Haylin had the support of multiple military families. For Rizef to become emperor, he needed Kedri's support. Because the Kedri family possessed the empire's most elite troops. Even if all of Haylin's forces combined, they couldn't match the Kedri family. But Kaina couldn't let Rizef have his way. If the two of them united, Kedri wouldn't help her leave the palace. So Kaina quickly explained that Duke Kedri was about to leave. Rizef couldn't communicate with him. As Kedri prepared to leave, watching Rizef embrace Kaina, his heart couldn't help but surge with turbulent emotions. Meanwhile, Kaina was still calculating her next big move. She was just one step away from completely uprooting all the undercover maids around her. Recently, the emperor had provided substantial financial support for Kaina's coming-of-age ceremony. But Kaina deliberately held back, waiting for an opportunity, a chance for the maids to plot something malicious. Finally, the opportunity came when the maids brought cookies to Kaina as a snack. When Bella received the snacks and was about to give them to Kaina, she suddenly became terrified. These were nut cookies. Didn't they know that Kaina was allergic to nut cookies? She wanted to help Kaina replace them. But Kaina smiled and stopped her, saying she was fine with eating these. Bella tried to stop her again. But Kaina calmly took a piece. She knew she would faint after eating the nut cookies, but this was exactly the effect she wanted. Bella was completely stunned. Was the princess playing with her life? Before eating, she instructed Bella to take tea snacks to Rizef, and told her to pretend she didn't know about the nut cookies. Soon after Kaina ate the cookies, she fainted. Annie promptly notified the royal physician and reported the incident to the emperor. When Rizef heard about it, he immediately rushed to Kaina's room. After treatment from the royal physician, Kaina finally escaped danger. But Rizef immediately drew his sword and began raging at the maids. Whether intentional or not, making Kaina eat nuts was already a capital offense. Kaina's mother had been killed by someone using nuts. Were they trying to kill Kaina too? Under Rizef's interrogation, a maid finally revealed the truth. The mastermind was Lydia again, the same maid who had previously caused Kaina to be scalded. Although she was from the Bowman family, Rizef would show no mercy this time. As he prepared to execute Lydia, the emperor suddenly arrived. Rizef had to drop his sword and obediently kneel before the emperor. He immediately ordered all the maids to be whipped and then expelled from the capital city forever. At the same time, he promoted Bella to head steward. Kaina's plan had succeeded. But then the emperor glanced at Rizef, instantly thinking of Kaina's recent tragic experiences. Although Kaina had survived by luck, he knew that Rizef was the mastermind behind it all. So he ordered Rizef to be confined until he recognized his mistakes. This meant that until the emperor's anger subsided, Rizef would never be allowed out. When Bella came to the princess's room, She found Kaina smiling at her and finally understood that everything had been planned by Kaina. Since Rizef's confinement, Kaina began consoling Bella. She knew Bella had been Rizef's person. But Kaina said that Bella's loyalty to her wasn't betraying Rizef. Instead, it was another form of loyalty. Rizef was usually too impulsive. Without Kaina's help, he could never become emperor, let alone grant Bella a noble title. Bella's sisters were about to be married off to ugly nobles by their family. Only by obtaining a title could Bella save her sisters from their misery. And Kaina could give her all of this. The reason Kaina chose her was also because she saw they had similar experiences. So they could better empathize with each other. After hearing this, Bella broke down in tears, swearing absolute loyalty to Kaina. Afterwards, Kaina immediately changed into her plainest dress, ready to begin her next plan. She came to the emperor's door and knelt for 6 consecutive hours. She had only one purpose: to plead for her good-for-nothing brother. She wasn't the only one pleading here. Nobles who supported Rizef were also present. But their presence only made the emperor more disgusted. It was because of Rizef's violent nature that Kaina had suffered so much. Although the nobles' collective plea put great pressure on the emperor, their actions actually challenged royal authority. Just as he was about to order severe punishment for Rizef, the head steward suddenly rushed in saying Kaina had fainted. Although Rizef's strategist sensed something unusual about this incident, and even deduced that the princess's poisoning was self-orchestrated, the current situation still required rescuing Rizef first, so he led the nobles in another plea to the emperor, hoping that, considering Kaina had fainted while pleading for Rizef, he would show leniency. The emperor finally relented, reducing Rizef's confinement to 10 days. Of course, Kaina's fainting was just an act. She told Bella that everything just now was the emperor's test of her. For Rizef, indefinite confinement meant the removal of inheritance rights. But given the emperor's personality, if he really wanted to dismiss Rizef, he would have issued a clear order. He did this to test how Kaina would handle the situation. Just as they were talking, the head steward suddenly brought the emperor's royal decree. From today on, Kaina would manage the palace maids. She happily accepted the key symbolizing power, her eyes flashing with deep meaning. This key had always been managed by successive empresses. She clutched the key tightly in her hand. At this moment, she had completely shed the title of puppet, but she wanted even more. The first thing she needed to do next was promote Olivia to be her personal attendant. Previously, the Kedri family had refused the order for Olivia to enter the palace, not wanting her to become Rizef's subordinate. But now it was different. Kaina's orders directly represented the emperor. Moreover, in the Kedri family's view, Kaina wasn't part of Rizef's faction. Olivia was the female protagonist of the novel, and having control over her would make Kaina's strongest trump card. Besides this matter, Kaina also planned to sow some discord during Rizef's 10 days of confinement. Although the behavior was somewhat shameful, once successful, she would gain even more power. So she came to the prince's residence. With a pitiful expression, she said, "I'm so worried about Rizef, can I see him for a moment?" Facing the angel-like princess, the knights instantly blushed, awkwardly saying they couldn't allow it. But privately they whispered among themselves about what was wrong with the princess visiting her brother. Look how pitiful she was. Nearby, the strategist Gino rolled his eyes and complained. These guys were easily conquered by the princess's simple act of coquetry. The princess actively apologized to Gino, saying it was her fault for worrying too much about Rizef and troubling everyone. Gino smiled on the surface while explaining that Rizef was fine. But internally he was cursing the princess. She was the one who caused Rizef's confinement, yet she came here pretending to care. Kaina dejectedly said she had troubled everyone. The knights, seeing the princess sad, all gave Gino death glares. He was completely exasperated with these guys. Just then, Kaina actively suggested that he escort her back to the princess's residence. Although he disliked Kaina, he had to agree for appearance's sake. Kaina asked about Rizef's situation, and Gino smiled, saying everything was fine. In reality, Rizef wasn't depressed at all. He was now as agitated as a husky, capable of demolishing the palace 2 or 3 times a day. She apologized to Gino again, saying it was because of her that Rizef was implicated. Gino outwardly consoled her, saying it was fine, while internally deeply despising Kaina. But he was still curious and asked who Kaina wanted to bring in as a maid. Kaina told him directly that the candidate was Gino's sister Julia. Gino was instantly shocked, speechless. If his sister could enter the palace, she might be able to marry Rizef and become the future empress. But could Kaina really be that kind-hearted? Kaina didn't give him much time to be surprised. She immediately asked if Gino was still single. Was it because his standards were too high? Gino awkwardly stated that at his age he was long past the time for romance. But Kaina asked if he would be willing to become her husband. Gino's eyes instantly widened at hearing this. If it had been the previous naive princess, he wouldn't have been interested at all. But Kaina had changed. She was clever and cunning, capable of being a good partner to Gino. If they married, he wouldn't need to bow and scrape before Rizef anymore. So he promptly knelt on one knee, gently kissed Kaina's hand, and expressed his willingness. He confidently believed he would be the final winner in this political marriage game. But he could never have dreamed that he had already fallen for Kaina's honey trap. After handling this matter, Kaina needed to quickly gather her 4 main maids to strengthen her power. Bella would serve as the political director. Annie would be the foreign affairs minister. Gino's sister Julia would manage the wardrobe. As for the crucial position of finance, Kaina chose Susan. Although this girl had a volatile temper, and even Kaina wasn't confident she could control her. But she was Olivia's best friend, and only this way could she better turn Olivia into her confidant. However, what Kaina most looked forward to was having her former nurse Kolo return. Now that Rizef had lost his power, it was the perfect opportunity to bring Kolo back. Only in front of her could Kaina completely let down her guard and bask in maternal love again. After writing a letter to Aunt Kolo, Kaina cheerfully went for a walk in the library. Unexpectedly, countless young men crowded in, hoping to catch a glimpse of the princess's beautiful face. Kaina didn't like such a high-profile life, so she left the library to admire the garden's beautiful scenery. Suddenly, a voice came from behind. She clearly felt that hellish call. "Kaina, it's been a long time." Kaina trembled in fear. Had that demon appeared again? When she saw his face, she stepped back in terror. Baron Burton. In her previous life, after being used by Rizef, she had been heartlessly thrown to Burton. Kaina was beaten black and blue by him every day. Kaina had begged Rizef for help countless times, but never received any response. Finally, he had mercilessly killed her. At this moment, Kaina constantly reassured herself that he wouldn't dare imprison her now. She pretended to greet him casually. "We've danced together before, haven't we?" Burton immediately became excited. But Kaina quickly added that she was only greeting him out of politeness. But how could a pervert like Burton easily let Kaina go? He kept advancing towards her, still talking about how her beauty from when they danced together lingered in his mind even now. He even grabbed Kaina's body and shook her repeatedly, confidently believing that Kaina must like him too. Kaina's mind went completely blank. At this critical moment, Kedri suddenly grabbed Burton's arm and threw him aside. Seeing Kaina trembling, he furiously questioned Burton, "Are you looking to die?" Burton hurriedly laughed it off, saying he only wanted to escort the princess. As he spoke, he kept staring intently at Kaina. Due to her severe psychological trauma from Burton, Kaina didn't dare expose his ugly nature. She had to lie and say she had just fainted, and Burton was only trying to help her up. Burton, seeing his scheme succeed, bid farewell with a wicked smile. His expression gave Kaina chills. After he left, Kaina finally breathed a sigh of relief and quickly thanked Kedri. She always troubled him whenever she was in danger. But just then she realized something was wrong and hurriedly pushed Kedri away. Goodness, they had unconsciously embraced again. When she asked Kedri why he was here, Kedri helplessly explained that he just came here on the off chance of seeing Kaina, since she had rejected him 10 times already. So she frankly asked if he had many things to ask her. Kedri nodded in admission. But when he saw Kaina's trembling body and pale face, he said they should leave it for another time. The current Kaina needed immediate rest. So he bowed to Kaina, hoping she would invite him for tea next time. Kaina was hesitant at first. But Kedri said with disappointment, "You've rejected me so many times, surely you won't reject me again?" Kaina's heart was instantly pierced. Seeing that Kaina hadn't refused, Kedri reminded her that the milk tea last time was unforgettable. But he could never learn to make it, hoping he could drink it again next time. Seeing Kedri's shy expression, Kaina was instantly amused. Smiling, she promised to make the best milk tea next time. After returning home, Kedri kept staring at his hands. What was wrong with him? Why did he have no adverse reaction whenever he had intimate contact with Kaina? Could it be that he was cured? To verify his hypothesis, he called a guard to hold his hand. In the room with just the two of them, the guard awkwardly accepted such an order. But as soon as he touched Kedri's hands, Kedri immediately withdrew them and hurriedly sent the guard away. Kedri understood that he wasn't cured, thinking about how Kaina showed no dislike when being supported by Rizef. And when he embraced Kaina, she similarly showed no signs of disliking him. This led to one conclusion: Kaina knew about Kedri's aversion to intimate contact. She pushed Kedri away only out of consideration for his feelings. The guard nearby, seeing Kedri's reaction, thought he and Kaina had sparked romantic feelings. But unexpectedly, Kedri suddenly asked his subordinate about Burton's situation. The subordinate told him that Burton was the eldest son and had danced with Kaina 2 months ago. He had even broken off his engagement with someone else, having fallen hopelessly in love with Kaina. However, this person was extremely promiscuous, always surrounded by 5 or 6 women. Kedri became more curious. Even if this fellow was dissolute, it shouldn't make Kaina so fearful. Kedri ordered his subordinate to investigate more information. Ever since seeing Kaina's terrified eyes, he felt he must protect her well. Meanwhile, Kaina was calculating how to eliminate Burton. The freed Rizef suddenly rushed to Kaina's presence and violently grabbed her throat. Since being confined by the Emperor, he had been reflecting on the entire incident. Originally, after his confinement, Kaina had gained the power to manage the palace maids. Kaina should have transferred this heavy responsibility to him. But Kaina kept holding onto the power tightly, which didn't match Kaina's personality. Even so, he could accept this. Because for Rizef, Kaina was like a ray of sunshine in the dark palace. As long as Kaina stayed by his side, he could feel at ease. But Kaina first seduced his strategist, then became overly intimate with Kedri. These abnormal behaviors made Rizef gradually understand that from his confinement by the Emperor to the gradual loss of his power, it was all secretly manipulated by Kaina after gaining his trust. He questioned Kaina if she wanted to break free from him. Kaina naturally wouldn't admit it. But Rizef simply didn't believe that Kaina only wanted a simple marriage. He suddenly grabbed Kaina's neck frantically, saying he didn't like anyone threatening his power. For those who threatened him, Rizef would eliminate them one by one, even if it was Kaina. Unexpectedly, Kaina suddenly smiled and directly told Rizef to kill her. Rizef was completely stunned. Kaina continued, saying he could take her life at any time. Rizef released his grip in shock and asked Kaina, "Have you gone mad?" Seeing him calm down, Kaina said, "I haven't betrayed you. You're a prince, you can't manage the palace maid's affairs. This is just a smokescreen the Emperor used deliberately because he doesn't want to give you real power." Rizef was instantly drawn in by her words and asked, "Is this an opportunity for me now?" Kaina affirmed positively, "It's absolutely the best opportunity." Then she gently stroked Rizef's face, reminding him not to forget what Kaina had said. She would help him ascend to the throne, and if Rizef wanted new power, Kaina would definitely help him. Rizef asked incredulously, "How exactly will you help me?" Kaina calmly stated that Rizef must first gain the Emperor's forgiveness. If the Emperor was happy, he should ask the Emperor about Kathleen's name. She was the Emperor's most beloved concubine, currently controlled by Haylin West, who had gained considerable power through her. And Rizef needed to make Kathleen become the adopted daughter of Kaina's grandfather Hamel, while also protecting her from being harmed by forces like Haylin West. But Rizef was completely confused, making the Emperor's concubine become family to the deceased Empress. "Are you sure you're not joking, Kaina?" He strongly doubted that Duke Ham would accept. But Kaina assured Rizef that compared to letting the Ham family lose their black market revenue, making Caitlin become her adopted daughter would bring greater benefits to Ham. Then Rizef raised another concern about Caitlin having a child with the Emperor. Since Rizef had helped Caitlin, what if her child became Emperor? Kaina reassured Rizef that Caitlin despised power struggles. She only wished to live a peaceful life with her son and would never let him compete for the throne. Even if Rizef agreed, Heinrich wouldn't allow another competitor for the throne. Plus, with their father favoring this youngest son, this was the only way for the siblings to survive. By protecting Caitlin, Rizef could gain their father's approval while securing an important hostage. Rizef couldn't believe it. His once narcissistic and naive sister could now analyze situations so thoroughly. Her commanding presence and strategic mindset made Rizef feel intimidated. Suddenly she grabbed Rizef's hand, asking if their misunderstanding was now cleared up. Rizef was even more stunned. Kaina seemed to have transformed back into his previous caring and kind sister. Rizef felt somewhat lost, though the misunderstanding was resolved and his anger had subsided. Kaina's intelligence now made him feel threatening, and he began to wonder how to deal with Kaina in the future. Having resolved the issue with Rizef, Kaina focused on preparing her next move. An important person had arrived, her new maid Olivia. This was Olivia's first time entering the palace, and under Bella's guidance, she quickly arrived at the princess's residence. To her surprise, the magnificent princess residence had only 4 maids including herself. And she was even put in charge of important duties like receiving guests. Her position was now second only to Bella the head maid, and she couldn't understand what Kaina was planning. Then under Bella's guidance she walked towards Kaina's room. Though she had been quite nervous at first, the gentle fragrance in the air soon calmed her emotions. Soon she met Kaina, who was wearing a purple dress. She gracefully curtsied to Kaina. Unexpectedly, she received Kaina's praise. Olivia's reporting date was originally tomorrow. Coming early to prepare showed she was very smart and proper, earning Kaina's favor. Kaina carefully observed the woman before her, though Olivia had no interest in power struggles. She was very intelligent and perceptive about reading people's intentions, choosing such a graceful and proper woman as her future surveillance backup. Kaina knew this was definitely a profitable arrangement. They were chatting when Duke Kedri came to visit. Kaina asked Olivia to leave for now as it wasn't yet time for Kedri to meet her. Then she changed into an elegant formal dress. With a bright smile she said, "Lord Kedri, you've come." Kedri politely bowed to the princess, gently kissing her hand. Kedri was full of anticipation at this moment, as Kaina had promised last time. Not only would she prepare milk tea for him again, but she would also answer all his questions. Kaina calmly stated that they had plenty of time today, and she would answer all of Kedri's questions. But first she asked him to have some tea. She specifically mentioned that she had prepared it personally for him. When Kedri touched the teacup, its gentle warmth immediately warmed his cold hands. The fragrance danced freely in his nostrils. At this moment, Kedri became even more confused. Though he had tried countless times following Kaina's instructions, he could never make such delicious milk tea. Did Kaina have some kind of magic? He shared his doubts with Kaina. But Kaina said he was overthinking it. Kaina began discussing the main topic with him. First, she asked if Kedri had investigated his potential marriage partners. Kedri said he had investigated them all, and the results were just as Kaina had predicted. Apart from Oliviana, the other 2 women either had connections with Heinrich or had mental illness. Fortunately, Kedri hadn't married them. Kedri was very curious how Kaina knew all this. He had also heard that Kaina had successfully driven away her maids through an allergy incident. He wondered what she was plotting by doing all these things. Faced with Kedri's questioning, Kaina showed no panic, instead displaying a meaningful smile. If Kedri wanted to know the truth, he would need to cooperate with Kaina. If Kedri agreed to cooperate, there could be no room for regret. She didn't care what Kedri wanted, she would swear to help him with all her might. In return, Kedri would also need to help her with all his strength. Worth noting was that this cooperation would all be beneficial for Kedri. Kedri admired Kaina's control over future situations, and pitted her fragility beneath her strong exterior. So he knelt on one knee before Kaina, kissed her hand and swore he would definitely support Kaina with all his might and protect her safety forever. Kaina finally showed a happy smile, saying, "Thank you then, my partner." Unexpectedly, Kedri said that making this decision wasn't difficult. Previously, Kaina had already done much to gain his trust, and Kedri had seen it all. So he believed Kaina wouldn't make wrong decisions. Many times before when he had contact with others, that painful, sickening feeling had tormented him for countless years. But since touching Kaina's gentle skin, he seemed to be completely healed. He loved being by Kaina's side, longing to forever enjoy this blissful feeling like a spring breeze. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but kiss her hand again. In an instant, Kaina's heart raced and her cheeks turned bright red. She hurriedly withdrew her hand, awkwardly thanking Kedri for his trust. To ease the awkwardness, she quickly changed the subject to business matters. She would soon arrange for Olivia to meet with Kedri. She was a very intelligent and kind girl. Hearing this, Kedri suddenly felt disappointed. He couldn't help asking Kaina why she kept mentioning Olivia to him. Actually, whenever Kaina mentioned Olivia, he would even feel antipathy. So he desperately wanted to know why Kaina kept doing this. Seeing his sudden emotional fluctuation, Kaina curiously asked if she had made him uncomfortable. But as soon as she asked this question, Kedri suddenly turned and took his leave. He ignored even Kaina's calls. Walking on the road, he kept asking himself what was wrong. Actually, his shy expression had already revealed everything. He had fallen in love with Kaina. He wasn't willing to let Kaina push him into someone else's arms. After parting with Kaina, Kedri immediately entered crazy letter-writing mode. Looking at the table full of letters, Kaina felt like she was about to break down. Bella couldn't help but comment that he must have fallen in love with the princess. Kaina hurriedly explained that this was impossible. However, Bella still warned that if Kedri continued writing letters like this, rumors would definitely spread about them. Kaina covered her face in despair, saying she also wanted to know which wire had crossed in Kedri's head. Actually, Kaina hadn't expected that her help in matchmaking between him and Olivia would make Kedri fall in love with her. At this rate, how could Kaina implement her plans? Kaina had been busy with Kedri's matters lately and was constantly in a state of exhaustion. So Bella decided to go to the central kitchen to get some nourishing ingredients for her. Olivia was curious why they, as the princess's personal maids, had to handle such small matters themselves. Hearing this, Bella seriously told her that they must maintain high vigilance even in the palace. Last time, a moment of negligence had led to Kaina's food poisoning. There were two people Bella didn't trust, the head chef and the head maid. Since Kaina took power, these two had always opposed her, and Bella suspected they had ulterior motives. So she decided to investigate them secretly. However, they were stopped halfway by the head maid. She shouted that outside personnel were strictly forbidden from entering the central kitchen. Bella knew this woman was picking a fight. As the princess's senior maid, she couldn't lose face. She stated that she was checking the princess's meals. How could she be considered an outsider? Plus, since the princess had recently been food poisoned, she must conduct strict inspections. But Bella was still too young. The head maid directly countered her, saying the previous poisoning was the maid's fault and had nothing to do with the kitchen. Bella couldn't argue with that. But for the princess's safety, she still pulled Olivia along, having Olivia distract the head chef while she secretly investigated his secrets. Unlike Bella, Olivia was cute and attractive. The head chef, being an old lecher, immediately lowered his guard upon seeing her. He started flirting with her directly, saying, "Little miss, you're quite pretty. How about considering becoming the head chef's wife? I'll take good care of you." Seeing Olivia being harassed, Bella couldn't stand by idly. She directly scolded him, but this completely exposed them both. The head chef knew Bella had come to investigate him, so he prepared to use this opportunity to teach them a lesson. However, just as he raised his arm to give Bella a harsh slap, Kaina made a powerful entrance wearing a black dress. Seeing the princess arrive, the head chef immediately cowered. Kaina suddenly smiled and asked Bella what food she couldn't eat. Bella was stunned at first, then listed nuts and seafood like fish. Hearing this, Kaina curved her lips in a smile, praising her attentiveness. She told the head chef that she had arranged for Bella to come investigate. Then she questioned the head chef if he had ordered the servants to bring grilled fish. The head chef immediately deflected blame, saying it was all arranged by the head maid. Hearing this, Kaina ordered the head maid to be summoned. At the same time, she wanted to properly inspect the central kitchen. Based on her memories of the previous life, Kaina knew the head chef had been embezzling. He would record purchasing premium ingredients in the account books, but actually put stones at the bottom of containers to embezzle funds. Moreover, the person controlling this from behind was Heinrich, who not only wanted to obtain Kaina's intelligence, but also wanted the head chef to bribe the head maid so they could monitor Rezef. Unexpectedly, when Kaina checked the ingredients, she found the evidence had been moved by the head chef. But she wasn't anxious because the real show was about to begin. Soon, the ingredient supplier arrived. The head chef thought it was over, as there were stones under every basket of vegetables. He hurriedly tried to have his subordinates drive the merchant away. But Kaina said it was fine. The merchant had traveled far to deliver vegetables. It was too tiring. She would personally receive them to express her gratitude. Soon Kaina met with the merchant and directly asked to see the receipts. But the merchant had already coordinated with the head chef. When asked about receipts, they would say they trusted each other and never used receipts. Hearing this, Kaina couldn't help but laugh out loud. Her laughter left everyone around puzzled, while the head chef was terrified and sweating profusely. She questioned the head chef if he thought she was a 3-year-old child. All along, she had tried to maintain rationality and tolerance, but these people had taken advantage of her kindness. Don't forget, Kaina had always been a villainess and this had never changed. Then she directly called the guards to tie up the head chef and ordered them to dump out the vegetables. Sure enough, they found stones inside. The head chef tried to explain, but Kaina wouldn't listen. She immediately ordered all those connected to the head chef to be imprisoned and thoroughly interrogated. The head maid nearby feared being implicated. She immediately publicly raised objections to Kaina. Kaina looked at the luxurious accessories the head maid was wearing, sneering mockingly, "You're truly foolish, actually wearing a traitor's items. Are you prepared for death?" The head maid was instantly terrified. She never dreamed that due to her momentary greed, she had actually worn the earrings of the Madrina royal family who had invaded the empire on her own ears. Before she could react, Kaina mocked, "A mere traitor dares to cause trouble in the palace. Immediately arrest this rebel." The head maid anxiously defended herself, saying she wasn't a traitor, she had always been loyal to the empire. Since she claimed to be wronged, then they would arrest the head maid and her entire family to see what grievances they actually had. Thus, Kaina effortlessly eliminated both the head chef and head maid. This way, she could act freely in the palace. Upon returning to the princess's residence, both Bella and Olivia immediately knelt down asking for punishment. Today was all their fault for acting recklessly, almost letting the head chef catch their weakness. Hearing this, Kaina calmly said their observation skills were indeed good, but today's actions were too rash. Being their mistress, they should tell Kaina first about any actions. Most importantly, Kaina didn't want them to suffer any harm. She gave them both big hugs. This moved them deeply, Bella even cried from emotion. Afterward, Kaina asked Bella how the Emperor evaluated Kaina's handling of the situation. Bella told Kaina that the Emperor only told Bella to support Kaina well. Hearing this, Kaina was quite happy. Her actions had not only caught the wrongdoers but also protected national property. The Emperor's words supported her actions, so she didn't need to worry about the noble's dissatisfaction. But how to deal with Rizef's embarrassment, she needed to think carefully about countermeasures. However, what worried her more was the person hiding behind the head maid. From the head maid's numerous pieces of evidence, the person quietly controlling her was He Lin, the Emperor Emeritus's illegitimate son. Although she had eliminated the head chef and head maid, He Lin must have arranged many other spies in the palace. Just thinking about He Lin's vicious appearance made Kaina's head ache. But what Kaina never dreamed of was her carefully selected maid was actually Kedri's spy. Taking advantage of the moonlight, she secretly met with Kedri. Originally, Kedri had planted eyes in the princess's residence just in case. Unexpectedly, Kaina's actions grew increasingly bold, and he received confidential reports about her almost daily. The spy told Kedri about recent events, even though these matters seemed like ordinary small things in Kedri's eyes. But when Kedri heard that Kaina was still thinking about matching him with Olivia, Kedri suddenly angrily demanded his assistant to quickly arrange opportunities for Kedri to accidentally encounter Kaina. Previously, after Kaina's persuasion, Rizef had changed his political strategy to protect Caitlin and her son. He also wanted to recommend Caitlin to become Count Ham's adopted daughter. The strategist beside him strongly opposed when he heard this and tried to stop Rizef, warning him that if Caitlin became the Count's adopted daughter, the next step would be her becoming empress, and her son would be the legitimate heir to the throne. Every time Rizef heard legitimate heir, he would become extremely agitated. Being only the emperor's illegitimate son was like a mental shackle torturing him daily. He angrily threw the book in his hand at the strategist's face and drove him out the door, roaring that he would definitely inherit the throne because he had Kaina's support. After the strategist left, Rizef suddenly remembered. He had once asked Kaina what she wanted. Kaina said she wanted freedom. But even this simple request, Rizef absolutely wouldn't grant. He immediately ordered his subordinates to distribute Kaina's portrait throughout the country. Even beggars on the streets had to be able to recognize Kaina. After arranging these things, he smiled with satisfaction, thinking he would control Kaina forever. But Rizef never dreamed that Kaina would move so quickly. His subordinates told him that Kaina was punishing illegal personnel in various palace departments. Even the head chef and head maid Rizef had planted were removed and investigated by Kaina. Rizef instantly sensed danger. Could Kaina be eliminating his forces? Moreover, with the Emperor's permission, Kaina wanted to recall Mother Colorado. This way, Colorado would definitely replace the headmaid's position. Then it would be even more difficult for Rizef to secretly monitor Kaina. So he immediately sent assassins to silence Colorado, thus eliminating the hidden trouble. Meanwhile, Kaina had carefully selected 2 new maids today. One was the extremely narcissistic Julia, who was the sister of Rizef's strategist Gino. The other was the cold and aloof Susan. Their personalities were like fire and water. Especially Julia, who was an absolute super fangirl. She was willing to become a maid just to come to the capital to catch handsome men. Her biggest dream was to seduce Duke Kedri. Bella was about to break down. She even wondered if the princess had lost her mind to find these 2 oddballs as maids. But when they met Kaina, Julia was instantly conquered by the princess's beauty. She had considered herself the Empire's #1 beauty, but upon seeing Kaina's otherworldly face, she immediately admitted defeat. Kaina knew the Mevin's family was very busy lately and thanked Julia for coming to be a maid. Julia felt very embarrassed hearing this, as she was the family's princess and left all the dirty work to her brothers. Then Kaina greeted Susan, saying she hoped Susan's father could attend her coming-of-age ceremony. Faced with the princess's sincere invitation, Susan still maintained her poker face, saying she would write to inform her father. Then Kaina told them to rest for today and familiarize themselves with the palace. Later, regular maids would tell them their responsibilities in the princess's residence. After leaving the princess's room, Julia felt extremely disappointed. She originally thought coming to the palace meant wearing beautiful dresses to attend various parties and meet handsome men. But on the first day, this dream was shattered. Not only was she deeply struck by the princess's beauty, she actually had to serve the princess. Just as she was breaking down, a maid suddenly appeared. She first flattered Julia with excessive compliments, then began explaining Julia's duties. She would be responsible for managing the princess's meals and refreshments, even having to worry about what medicine to take. Julia was now more desperate. She was a complete princess who knew nothing. She couldn't even tell carrots from cucumbers apart. Would she really not make Kaina sick? What surprised her even more was that among the personal high-ranking maids, while Bella and others could manage jewelry and dresses, why was Julia so unfortunate? She timidly asked the maid if it was too late to regret now. The maid said that having Julia serve as a palace maid was a direct order from the princess. Wanting to quit or change positions would also require the princess's personal approval. The maid wanted to explain that this was the most important position. But by then Julia was already so scared her soul had left her body, completely unable to hear anything the maid was saying. Actually, even the maid didn't know. Julia's initial plan was to have a beautiful encounter with handsome men in the capital. She had already set her sights on Duke Kedri and Prince Rizef. Originally she was still struggling whether to choose Rizef, who was younger than her, or the manly Kedri. But now this dream was completely shattered. Meanwhile, Kaina encountered another problem. Kedri suddenly sent a letter. In the letter, he said to celebrate Kaina's coming-of-age ceremony, he wanted to build a building at the Royal Academy. So he needed to discuss the construction details with Kaina. Kaina thought, was this guy sick or something? Building a whole building just to meet her, what kind of person would think of that? How could Kaina easily pass up such a good opportunity? She decided to arrange a formal meeting between Olivia and Kedri. So she asked Bella to work on Olivia's mindset. Bella told Olivia that an important guest would be visiting the princess soon. It was time to test Olivia's abilities, so this reception duty would be given to her. Olivia was curious about which important figure it was. Bella calmly said it was Lord Duke Kedri. Upon hearing this, she completely broke down. Her father's letter had just expressed regret about her not being able to marry Kedri. Olivia actually felt relieved about being able to come to the palace instead. But now she had to meet Kedri again. After thinking for a long while, she decided to receive Kedri. But before that, she needed to meet with Kaina. Then she went to see Kaina. She confessed to Kaina that her abilities were indeed lacking. She worried she would make mistakes when receiving Kedri and embarrass Kaina. Hearing this, Kaina smiled and said that clever Olivia would definitely not mess things up. In this situation, Olivia had no choice but to speak her mind. Her marriage with Kedri had just been cancelled. It wouldn't look right if she went to meet Kedri now. Seeing this situation, Kaina had to be honest with her. Previously, to make Olivia her maid, she had caused Olivia's marriage with Kedri to be cancelled. Kaina confessed to her that she had indeed liked Kedri before, and had therefore humiliated Olivia. She sincerely apologized to Olivia. She even bowed deeply to her, which deeply moved Olivia. She quickly grabbed Kaina's hands, telling her not to be like this. She hadn't taken that incident to heart at all. Kaina gazed at her intently. Actually, she wasn't apologizing to Olivia for this incident. Subconsciously, Kaina was very jealous of Olivia. She had therefore suffered various forms of revenge from Kaina. And in the original novel, Olivia was the true female protagonist. Now Kaina was constantly trying to match Olivia with Kedri. After Kaina's guidance, Olivia finally let go of her burden and decided to meet Kedri openly. She promised she wouldn't bring shame to the princess's residence. But what she didn't expect was that her first date with Kedri would be so awkward. At the dining table, Kedri was tasting tea. The rich flavor suited his taste. However, Olivia, who prepared the tea, didn't know he preferred strong tea. Kedri looked at the woman before him with beautiful long hair and green eyes. Yet his heart was melancholic, wondering if Kaina's words were sincere. She actually wanted him to be with Olivia. This woman was truly unfathomable. Why would she push him to another woman? Completely unaware of the coldness at the tea party, Olivia decided to say something to break the silence. However, after trying 3 different topics, Kedri responded coldly. Brief verbal gestures quickly ended the conversation. Entirely unaware of the awkward atmosphere, Olivia was speechless. Was this man really the gentleman everyone talked about? With such perfunctory manners, how could the princess care so much about someone like him? At this moment, Kaina arrived, her golden hair gleaming in the sunlight, her water-blue eyes clear as sapphires. Kedri, who had been waiting, quickly stood up, looking excitedly at Kaina. Kaina didn't quite understand what was happening, then saw Kedri walking over. She just realized that today's Kedri was different from usual. His neat bangs were let down and his clothes were brighter than usual. Seeing Kaina staring at him, Kedri felt a bit shy. Is my appearance today not suitable? Kaina immediately assured him it was super suitable. Kedri was very happy and immediately knelt down, wanting to perform a hand kiss in gratitude. However, the princess suddenly realized she had forgotten to wear gloves and was momentarily at a loss. Unexpectedly, Kedri only paused for a moment before kissing her hand. The guards nearby were excitedly stirred. But Kaina didn't understand their master-servant thoughts. What was this about? Had she somehow offended him? Before Kaina could figure it out, Olivia beside her was about to take her leave. Kaina wanted to stop her. This tea party was prepared for them, but Kedri coldly said they would meet next time. Looking at the inexplicably incompatible atmosphere between them, Kaina was puzzled. She had thought letting them spend time alone would naturally spark feelings. She had thought too simply. They sat down to chat, and Kaina brought up the gift Kedri had given her. Hearing this, Kedri said he didn't know what to give, hoping Kaina would like this gift. Kaina was momentarily speechless. Kedri was the first man who gave her reputation instead of dresses and jewelry. This was a gift her previous self could never have received. Thinking of this, she smiled brightly. I really like this gift, thank you. Then she saw Kedri asking with a sincere expression, Then would you like another building? Kaina was happy about Kedri's transformation. But she didn't expect him to be such a spendthrift. So she hurriedly advised him to calm down. Who knew Kedri thought Kaina didn't like buildings? So he proposed to give her sacred relics from the ancient kingdom. Kaina quickly stopped him. She was already very happy that he cared so much about her, and told him not to waste any more money. Looking at Kedri's sincere expression, Kaina's heart was almost captured. Originally adhering to anti-marriage principles, Kaina was about to fall at this moment. She thought to herself, how could this guy be so handsome? Just then she quickly made herself calm down. But unexpectedly, Kedri suddenly turned into a master of flirtation. When Kaina asked him why he came, Kedri expressed that he came because he missed Kaina too much. His straightforward way of confession nearly caused the night Boston to collapse in shock. Kaina quickly changed the subject, asking, Didn't you have questions for me? Kedri instantly understood that he had been rejected by Kaina. So he calmly asked he had cancelled his engagement and wondered what plans Kaina had next. Unexpectedly, after hearing this, Kaina immediately dismissed all the servants. Then, with a queen's demeanor, told Kedri that she needed his help to arrange a husband. A hypothetical husband with supreme power. Kedri was completely stunned after hearing this. He had just been rejected by Kaina, and now she was in such a hurry to get married. Because only this way could the princess escape from the Empire's most cruel butcher. In her previous life, Kaina let Rizef manipulate her. In others' eyes, Kaina was like his puppet. Whether life or death had to be played with at Rizef's whim. In the end, Rizef even gave her to a psychopath, letting Kaina die miserably in endless torture. In this life, she must change her destiny. But if she wanted to completely change her fate, she had to wait until Kedri fully inherited the Duke's position. According to the original plot in the novel, Kedri's father had an affair. After divorcing Kedri's mother, he was expelled by the family. Kedri thus inherited the position of Duke. But Kaina suddenly felt that using Kedri's family scandal like this might not be good. At this moment, Kedri noticed her strange expression and asked Kaina why she kept staring at him. Kaina awkwardly explained that Kedri looked good in whatever clothes he wore, so she couldn't help but stare. Unexpectedly, Kedri smiled after hearing this, saying Kaina was the same. His words made Kaina's heart flutter. Why did he say such misleading things again? Kaina was about to leave. This guy was too good at flirting, staying with him any longer might make her completely fall for him. But Kedri blocked her path, asking Kaina if being with him made her uncomfortable. Kaina's heart kept racing, awkwardly explaining, no, not at all. But he still wouldn't let it go. He actually grabbed Kaina's sleeve and asked why she always avoided him. This time Kaina could no longer stay calm, thinking why wasn't he following the script? Wasn't he supposed to hate intimate contact? Why was he now getting physical with her? Kaina hurriedly explained that she was just worried about making Kedri uncomfortable. Who knew Kedri would hold her in his arms? Softly saying he wasn't uncomfortable at all, rather it made him sad that Kaina always avoided him. After saying this, he escorted Kaina out of the garden. Being so close to him again, Kaina's cheeks couldn't help but blush. When Kedri noticed, she quickly explained it was too hot here. They were both quietly undergoing changes. But they were still too naive to notice. Kedri's assistant Knight Boston had already noticed something was wrong. The former Kedri on the battlefield was like the god of death that made barbarians tremble in fear. With his fearless determination, he completely suppressed the barbarian rebellion. It was also in that battle that he saved Boston from the brink of death, allowing him to successfully transform from a mercenary into an official imperial knight. However, Kedri, who had fallen in love, had shed his cold exterior. Even Boston was happy for Kedri. However, in order to be with Kaina, Kedri was also secretly making preparations. His next target was to deal with that annoying Burton. Who told this guy to always harass Kaina? Kedri had been patient for a long time. Having just dated the princess, he was in a good mood. Upon learning about a love rival, he instantly developed killing intent. Kedri had previously arranged for Jeremy to investigate Baron Burton secretly. Unexpectedly, this guy was so dirty. In the past 5 years, he had joined forces with many scumbag nobles, establishing a so-called gentleman's club, but privately engaged in drug trafficking. Kedri looked at the investigation report, angrily furrowing his brows. This guy was even involved in child trafficking and illegal gambling. Originally, Kedri could still tolerate these things. But Jeremy also discovered Burton had recently become very close with Rizef and Haylin. It seemed he wanted to improve his relationship with Kaina through them. Hearing this, Kedri instantly exploded with killing intent. Such trash should be eliminated early. How dare this guy covet his beloved Kaina? Jeremy was startled. Burton was not only a baron. Their family also controlled the Empire's military horse industry, and the Kedri family was strongest in cavalry. So whether assassination or open killing would both produce extremely serious consequences. Kedri certainly understood these things. He was just venting his anger verbally. As Kaina's coming-of-age ceremony approached, she became increasingly excited. Bella was truly her most loyal confidant. Whether it was the banquet list or the arrangement of servants on site, she had organized everything perfectly. Even the banquet invitations she made were very beautiful. Having her help really saved Kaina a lot of trouble. Kaina knew that the more successful the banquet was, the more intense the competition for her hand would become. That would also be the best opportunity for her to escape with her fake husband. However, before that, she wrote a letter to Kedri, having Olivia help deliver it, conveniently creating an opportunity for them to meet. Olivia was actually quite resistant. If not for Kaina's orders, she would never go. Their first meeting had already left her with psychological trauma. But this time when Kedri saw her, he actually greeted her proactively. Then she gave the letter to Kedri. Kedri was instantly stunned, his face involuntarily blushing. In her previous life, Kaina had written him many love letters, but he had thrown them all away as waste paper. But this time receiving Kaina's letter made his little heart pound wildly. This shocked Olivia, who was standing beside him. In the letter, Kaina expressed she wanted to go see that building Kedri had helped her donate. But she didn't know what to say to the academy elites, so she wanted to ask Kedri to accompany her. When Jeremy heard the news, he quickly asked when he planned to go. Kedri replied without hesitation that he would go in 2 days. But Jeremy reminded him that Kedri was supposed to go to the cathedral in 2 days. Who knew Kedri didn't care at all, immediately returning to his desk, seriously writing a reply letter to Kaina. Jeremy was completely stunned this time. He hadn't believed Boston when he said Kedri had changed. Now he completely believed it. The power of love was truly remarkable. After receiving Kedri's reply, Kaina finally felt relieved. But now she had more important things to do. Tomorrow her brother Rizef's confinement would be lifted. To quickly break free from Rizef's control, she must help Kedri obtain the appointment letter to govern the West. Now his parents were getting divorced. But before Kedri got married, no retainers would agree to let him inherit the Duke position. If Kaina could help him get the appointment letter, then Kedri would successfully become Duke. But Kaina didn't know that Rizef's advisor Mavens had also sensed danger, and was thinking about how to punish Kaina. Unexpectedly Burton came calling at this time. Mavens originally didn't want to deal with him. But thinking that Kaina seemed quite afraid of Burton, he immediately changed his attitude and agreed to meet Burton. He planned to use Burton to get rid of both Kaina and Kathleen. Then Burton expressed that his family was willing to support Rizef. But he had no interest in the throne competition. As he himself said, he was a super collector, most obsessed with collecting beautiful things in the world. From the first moment he saw Kaina, he felt she was the most beautiful woman in the world, and it made him feel a strong desire for possession. So his price for helping Rizef was to have Kaina given to him. He wanted to turn Kaina into his most perfect collection. After hearing this, Mavens coldly told him tomorrow Kaina would go to the cathedral, with Kedri accompanying her. Burton instantly became angry. If it wasn't for Kedri's interference last time, he would have already gotten Kaina. Thinking of this, he wanted to tear Kedri into pieces. But this was Burton's best chance. There was a secret room in the cathedral. As long as one donated enough money, it could be used freely, and the cathedral wouldn't allow others to enter. In other words, even if the royal family came, they couldn't interfere. As long as Burton caught Kaina, he could do whatever he wanted with her. Meanwhile, Kaina went to see the emperor. The emperor was now terminally ill, frequently coughing up blood. But Kaina had been helping him handle state affairs recently, which made the emperor very happy. Then he gave Kaina the appointment letter, and praised that Kaina had been performing very well lately. After leaving the emperor's chamber, Kaina kept thinking about the emperor's praise. Really didn't expect he would compliment her. Perhaps the emperor had seen Kaina's growth, and thinking about his own impending death, felt many regrets towards Kaina. The next morning, Kaina's group arrived at the academy building. Finding Kedri hadn't arrived yet, she realized she had come too early. But just then, a commotion came from not far away. Kaina looked carefully. It was actually a silver-haired, blue-eyed little boy. She didn't expect to meet Kathleen's son here. This was Kaina's first encounter with Ethel. He was the child of the emperor's lover Kathleen. Therefore, Ethel had suffered bullying since childhood. She didn't expect to personally witness Ethel being beaten up by others, suddenly feeling that although this kid was naughty, he was really quite adorable. So she smiled and greeted Ethel. He reluctantly bowed to Kaina. When Kaina asked him why he was fighting, Ethel thought Kaina was meddling in his business. Of course Kaina had to get involved, after all they were half-siblings. Hearing this, Ethel's face instantly darkened. He was used to being bullied by Rizef and Haylin, because of his mother being the emperor's lover. They had always lived a difficult life. Now Kaina, who had always supported Rizef, came looking for him. Surely she couldn't have good intentions. Just as Kaina tried to help clean his wounds, he fiercely rejected her, his attitude even more arrogant than before. Kaina wasn't a saint. She certainly wouldn't indulge a bratty child's misbehavior. So she asked the principal to leave. She would personally discipline this child. The terrifying aura she emitted instantly scared Ethel. But what he didn't expect was, Kaina's so-called punishment was just a gentle pinch on his face. This left Ethel completely confused. He thought the sister must be crazy. So he questioned, was this really punishment? Kaina explained that making him accept help from the royal family he hated wasn't punishment enough. Then she added that perhaps Ethel would think Kaina was using him. But looking at it from another angle, while Ethel was still weak, he should learn to use powerful people to protect himself. That way he could better protect his mother too. Only by giving up that humble pride could he better survive. Only when he became strong himself could he truly change his fate. The reason Kaina said these things to him was because she saw her former weak and helpless self in him. Ethel gradually lowered his guard against her. While talking, she also helped treat Ethel's wounds. Not only that, Kaina also punished those children who had bullied Ethel. What Kaina did for him touched him deeply. Since the emperor fell ill, he and his mother had faced all kinds of ostracism. Former friends had gradually distanced themselves. The academy principal often oppressed him too. He didn't want to be crown prince, just wanted to live happily with his mother. He wanted to have many friends. At this moment, hope was rekindled in him who had originally despaired of life. Kaina was like light illuminating his dark life. He was about to ask if Kaina could help him, when suddenly Kaina asked him to take off his clothes. Ethel was instantly scared and covered his body, wondering if sister was some kind of pervert. Kaina just wanted to help apply medicine, since she couldn't reach without removing clothes. But Ethel insisted on doing it himself. After all, he was already 13. It would be too awkward to strip in front of his sister right after meeting her. While Kaina was waiting for Ethel to change, a maid suddenly came to report that Kedri had arrived. So she quickly brought Ethel out to greet him. She curiously asked Kedri why he had come to this place. Kedri said he heard Kaina had suddenly come to the academy interior, thought something might be wrong, so he rushed over too. Just then he noticed the child beside Kaina. She hurriedly explained. This was her brother Ethel. Kedri said he knew about Ethel quite well. It was said he had extraordinary fighting talent, might become a famous swordsman in the future. But his temper wasn't very good, he had beaten up all the kids around him. But what Kedri didn't expect was, the little fellow was very well behaved around Kaina except for his arrogant expression. It seemed Kaina really had charm. Seeing Kedri arrive, Kaina prepared to go with him. Upon hearing this, Ethel was instantly disappointed. He thought Kaina was going to abandon him too. But unexpectedly Kaina directly took his hand, bent down and smiled as she said goodbye, saying they would meet again. Next time don't call her princess, just call her sister. Only then did Ethel realize Kaina's care for him was genuine. Everything she did for Ethel was slowly prying open the long-closed door of Ethel's heart. Then she left with Kedri. On the way, Kedri asked why she was so nice to Ethel. Kaina said he was after all her brother. She didn't want Ethel to always suffer betrayal. At Ethel's age, he most needed others' care and protection. Unexpectedly, Kedri suddenly became jealous. He leaned close to Kaina from behind and tenderly said, if Kaina could care for him like that, Kedri would be infinitely grateful. Kaina was frightened by him. This man was too good at flirting. This time he was even more direct. If Kaina didn't run away quickly, she would probably fall into his embrace. But what was more embarrassing was yet to come. She originally just wanted to quietly have a meal with Kedri and discuss their next plans. Who knew this guy would bring her to a romantic restaurant? She thought Kedri had some special preferences. Actually, even Kedri wasn't clear. This was the date location specially picked by his subordinate Boston. Looking at the elegant surroundings, the beautiful music played by the band, and the enchanting Kaina before him, Kedri completely relaxed. He told Kaina this was the first time in his life he experienced that spending time with someone could be so pleasant. That person who made him happy was Kaina. She had completely changed Kedri. Kaina had given him the most joy. The more Kaina listened, the more something felt off. If he hadn't been possessed by someone else, there was only one possibility. Kedri was about to confess to her. Kaina instantly panicked. Had her appearance completely changed the novel's plot? Kaina became a bit flustered. The biggest problem now was that Kedri had feelings for Princess. And Kaina wasn't against it. But in the novel, Kedri and Olivia were destined for each other. She couldn't interfere with them. So Kaina steeled her heart and gently rejected him, saying, "Though I don't know your exact thoughts, I think our current relationship is best." Hearing the princess's words, Kedri felt somewhat dejected. "Princess, I understand." Then Kaina thought, everything seemed to be going smoothly. But this matter was unexpected. Was it just her imagination? Beside her, Olivia worriedly asked, "Princess, you don't look well." Actually, Kaina felt awkward facing her. After all, she almost stole her future husband. Olivia thought the princess was worried about Ethel, so she informed her of the school's handling of the matter. Kaina also felt relieved the goal had been achieved. Then the two came to the carriage just as Kaina was about to get on. The coachman's extended hand made her sense something was wrong, feeling like she had seen it somewhere before. "Princess, shall we return to the palace now?" the coachman asked. Though dressed like a normal coachman, ordinary coachman would be nervous talking to her. But this person appeared completely at ease. Most crucially, the surroundings were too quiet. As if the area had been cleared in advance. At this point, Kaina took out the military appointment letter and said, "Olivia, it's better to deliver this to Lord Kedri sooner. Please go take it to him." Olivia hesitantly accepted it and left. Kaina then very seriously asked, "Tell me, what business do you have with me?" The disguised coachman still played dumb. "Looks like you don't want to reveal your identity." Kaina thought for a moment about who would consider her an enemy. And this person wasn't afraid at all of being discovered. This man skillfully controlled the situation, with no one around who could help her. Only by doing this could she make him reveal weaknesses. Then Kaina stepped forward and said to the coachman, "I advise you to resolve this before Olivia returns." The method Kaina thought of was provocation, and it really worked. At this point, the man before her stopped pretending, walking straight toward the princess. Then embraced Kaina, saying, "Your spirit of sacrificing yourself to protect your maid really moves me." Then 4 or 5 people came out to subdue Kaina. Meanwhile, Olivia, who was heading to Kedri's mansion, realized the princess wouldn't suddenly change her mind. Something must be wrong. But in the next second, a man suddenly emerged from the bushes and slashed at her with a sword. However, fortunately, Kedri arrived in time. Olivia grabbed Kedri like seeing a life-saving straw, saying, "Please save the princess. Something seems to have happened to her." On the other side, Kaina was locked in a dungeon. "I heard you caused quite a scene on the way here. I indeed hadn't misjudged you. Long time no see, princess." This incident alarmed the entire palace. In their view, disturbing the ill emperor for this matter wasn't worth it. After all, the safety of the nation's ruler was the top priority. Then someone asked if they should inform Prince Rizef. But he was still under house arrest by His Majesty and couldn't leave freely. Olivia heard all this outside the door. Believing they must take action first, or the princess would surely be in danger. Rizef didn't know what was happening outside. The noise outside the door caught his attention. It turned out Olivia had burst in despite the guards' attempts to stop her. Then knelt before Rizef. Rizef asked somewhat bewilderedly, "Who are you?" A guard hurriedly tried to drag Olivia away. She anxiously said, "Prince Rizef, please help the princess." At this point, Rizef remembered, this was his royal sister's maid. Seeing Rizef not responding, Olivia urgently said, "The princess has been kidnapped." Faced with Olivia's plea, Rizef asked in disbelief, "What did you say?" Olivia replied somewhat tearfully, "The princess was kidnapped an hour ago, but no one in the palace is willing to help save her." Hearing this, Rizef's face showed anger. Then walked toward Olivia. Gently lifted her chin. Asked expressionlessly, "Kidnapped?" Olivia startled, clearly realizing the man before her was dangerous. Her body involuntarily trembled. Lord Kedri searched the scene and reached this conclusion. After receiving confirmation again, Rizef stood up to leave, planning to go search for his sister. But people beside him advised, "You're still under house arrest." Doing this would be defying royal orders. Then a group of guards blocked him. Rizef drew his sword without hesitation, slashed at the guards beside him, then said without emotion, "Immediately mobilize troops to surround the capital. If you can't find the princess before dark, you need not return." Meanwhile, Kaina had just woken up in the dungeon. When a person bringing food said, "Don't bother calling for help, no one will hear you." At this point, Kaina wasn't scared, but instead laughed wildly like a madwoman. This frightened the guards nearby. Kaina looked at that group of people and said with a smile, "Let's make a deal. If you obediently unlock these chains and release me, I'll spare your lives." The guard shouted, "You don't seem to understand your situation, you've been kidnapped." Before he could finish, Kaina showed that beautiful smile and asked, "Am I the one who doesn't understand the situation?" She asked this because she knew that person must be somewhere eagerly observing all of this. Then continued, "If I'm not mistaken, some of you must be working for Heilin. If you don't let me go, those unfavorable pieces of information about you will reach my brother's ears. Like your organization's secret hideouts." At these words, the group trembled in surprise. One of them retorted, "You're in our hands now, how could you send messages to your brother?" Kaina continued smiling and said, "Because I was already prepared to be kidnapped." She clearly knew that the more power she held, the more enemies would surround her. When she truly gained real power, Rizef's forces would surely eliminate her. Among them, the Maven's family had the strongest motivation, but she had already prepared countermeasures. "If you don't release me, then just wait and see if what I said is true or not. Think it over carefully." After a long while, the guards became anxious, all fearing Rizef's arrival. After all, kidnapping royalty was a serious crime. This was exactly what Kaina had hoped for. Her goal was to create discord among them. But Kaina felt something wasn't quite right. Because among that group there was one man who just sat quietly, smiling as he watched her. Seeing those golden eyes, Kaina was shocked. She hadn't expected Heilin to come personally. But this was even better. This was a rare opportunity. By now Olivia should have discovered her kidnapping. Kaina felt if she asked Heilin for help he would assist. Would Kedri come to save her? Thinking of this, Kaina paused. That day they had parted on bad terms. But deep in her heart she still hoped he would come save her. I must be crazy. At this point Kaina's face began to redden. Just then a cold voice rang out, "Why so noisy? I heard you caused quite a scene on your way here, princess." Kaina glared at the newcomer and said coldly, "Burton Jillian." The man instead lifted Kaina's chin, smirking as he said, "You'd better change that arrogant attitude of yours." This sentence actually awakened her. She had been too harsh lately, not at all like a villainess. So she smiled and replied, "I'm glad I saw your bottom line, Burton Jillian." Meanwhile, Rizef, who had arrived, felt very troubled. Because those lowly creatures dared to touch his sister and he couldn't find them. "My beautiful and gentle sister. No one else may touch even a finger of hers, she belongs only to me." "Your Highness." A guard's words brought Rizef back to reality. "We found some suspicious people." Rizef just replied flatly. "Have you found my royal sister?" The guard responded, "Not yet." So Rizef asked those who were caught, "What were you sneaking around in that house for?" "I don't understand what you mean." The next moment, a gunshot rang out, and that person fell in a pool of blood. "One shot, one kill," Rizef said with a smile. "No wonder the law prohibits carrying guns." The next moment, he pointed the gun at another person's head. "All right, now it's your turn to speak. I'm in a particularly bad mood right now." That person trembled and said, "It was young Master Burton Jillian." Kaina's composure made Jillian somewhat surprised. This was different from the Kaina he knew. Before she was just outwardly beautiful, with an empty heart like a doll. Now her eyes were full of disgust. Jillian trembled with excitement. Then burst out laughing. His eyes showing some greed, he said to Kaina, "This makes me want to conquer you even more." Then ordered people to take the princess away. That group came before the princess, complaining that the person sent to deal with Olivia was too slow. This made Kaina worried, but she had to stay calm right now and find the right moment to escape. At this time, someone suddenly pulled out a dagger from their chest and stabbed at the person escorting the princess. This threw Jillian's men into chaos. One of them shouted, "You idiots, quickly deal with the traitor." Meanwhile, Jillian looked at Kaina, his expression becoming increasingly twisted. Seeing the opportunity was ripe, Kaina planned to escape. Suddenly a pair of large hands reached out from her side, tightly gripping her neck. Kaina was so uncomfortable she almost fainted. Remembering how she had died painfully before, she didn't want to die like this. There were still many unfinished things. Memories flashed through her mind like a revolving lantern. Those familiar faces passed by again and again. Then she endured the discomfort and bit Jillian hard. Jillian pushed Kaina away because of the pain. Looking at the bite mark on his arm, Jillian lunged at Kaina. Kaina closed her eyes tight, preparing to accept her fate of death. At this critical moment, an arrow shot over. The pain on his face and sudden change in situation brought Jillian back to his senses. The people coming to rescue the princess had finally arrived. At this point Kedri drew his sword at Jillian, saying viciously, "I should have killed you back then." The princess asked him to show mercy. Jillian took the opportunity to escape. He came to a large tree, touching his injured face with regret. "Damn it, I was so close to succeeding, all because of that cursed Kedri." Then he comforted himself softly, saying, "It's okay though this attempt failed. There will be other opportunities." At this moment, Lord Rizef was already standing behind him. Jillian remained completely unaware, still plotting how to completely possess Kaina. At this moment, Rizef pressed his gun against the back of Jillian's head, then spoke coldly, saying, "I wondered who was talking to themselves. So it was you hiding here." Rizef, irritated and dissatisfied, grabbed Jillian's hair. "Do you know why I hate people like you who don't know their place? Because you always cross the line. Burton Jillian, you foolish man who doesn't know his limits." Meanwhile, Kedri's subordinate came to report that they hadn't caught Jillian. Kedri was somewhat surprised, then ordered his men to thoroughly search the surrounding area. Before they could move, the sound of horse hooves rang out. The bound Jillian was thrown to the ground. Seeing the person on horseback, Kedri and his subordinates all bowed deeply. It was Rizef. "Jillian is right here. Have you found my sister?" Kedri replied, "Lord Rizef, the princess is here." Seeing his unconscious sister, Rizef became anxious, but then calmed down, looking at Jillian with a sinister gaze, then dismounted and strode towards him. At this moment, facing the enraged Rizef, Jillian smiled and said, "You share responsibility for the princess's kidnapping. Since she's so precious to you, you should have protected her better. If it were me, I would never allow anyone to covet what's mine." These mocking words made Rizef lose his rationality. He pinned Jillian down, both hands tightly choking his neck. Rizef's face became increasingly twisted. At this point Kedri tapped him. "Lord Rizef, please calm down. We still need Jillian to find the mastermind. You must maintain your composure." Though Rizef desperately wanted to kill him right now, he held back, then ordered people to throw all these criminals into the dungeon. The princess remained unconscious until early the next morning. After the doctor's examination, Kaina only had some blood stagnation, but was otherwise unharmed. Rizef looked at his sister with heartache, then gently stroked her forehead. At this moment, Kaina opened her eyes briefly, seeing the two people in front of her. Both Rizef and Kedri noticed. Rizef anxiously asked, "Sister, are you awake? Do you know where you are?" Kaina didn't respond to Rizef's questions. She only reached out her hand toward Kedri, her lips repeatedly murmuring, "Iwin, Iwin." Kedri beside her comforted her, saying, "Princess, everything has been resolved, please rest well." Rizef clearly couldn't believe it. Before he only had suspicions. Now he was completely certain. Sister had changed from her usual behavior and wanted to leave me, all because of Iwin Kedri. It's all because of this guy. Kaina couldn't have escaped alone, because she was famous throughout the country and Kaina herself knew. Escaping the palace meant escaping from Rizef, but she still insisted on leaving. This meant she had found a way out. If Iwin Kedri was really helping Kaina, what should I do? Why would Iwin Kedri help Kaina? Seeing that Kaina's emotions had stabilized, although Rizef had so many doubts, he still held back from asking. "Thanks to you, sister is safe and sound. Getting you to mobilize the family knights must have been difficult to convince Duke Kedri." Facing Rizef's challenge, Kedri replied calmly, "Not at all, because from today onwards I am the leader of the Kedri family." This news surprised Rizef. Later, Rizef returned to the palace and summoned Gino Muins, asking how Iwin Kedri became Duke. Gino Muins didn't know either. So Rizef asked, "What did my sister do before being kidnapped?" But Gino Muins stammered, saying, "I only know the princess went to see His Majesty." Then Rizef flew into a rage, throwing his cup at him. "Gino Muins, why are you just standing there like an idiot? Quickly go find out exactly what Kaina and father discussed alone." At this moment, Gino Muins anxiously bit his fingers. How could such things possibly be investigated? And most importantly, Burton Jillian needed to be silenced. Otherwise, if Rizef discovered that the princess's kidnapping was related to him, the consequences would be unthinkable. While Gino Muins was still feeling uneasy, an attendant asked, "Guest, did you bring a gift?" After searching around, Gino Muins took out a coin, saying, "Of course I brought one, here, check it." The attendant confirmed and led him to the back door. Gino Muins came here seeking help. When the door opened, he couldn't believe that the person before him was Ishtae Lin. At this moment the door behind suddenly closed, seeing Gino Muen's reaction. Heilin spoke, "Didn't I tell you I was Count Jordia?" Gino Muens never expected this contractor's leader would be him. Heilin spoke with a playful tone. "I've always been curious about who would be bold enough to kidnap the princess. I never expected it would be related to the second son of Marquis Muens." Then he tightly gripped Gino Muen's chin saying, "Why do you look so dispirited? Hasn't the princess caused many people trouble? She not only anticipated being kidnapped but also knew who was behind it. Don't you find that strange? Haven't you noticed anything about the series of events that have happened lately?" Then he poured some red wine. Gino Muens played dumb saying, "I don't understand what you're talking about." Heilin gave a contemptuous laugh. "They say the Marquis's son is shrewd. But to me it seems that reputation is undeserved." Gino Muens asked angrily, "What do you mean by that?" Heilin replied coolly, "Princess's kidnapping lasted barely half a day before Prince Rizef defied royal orders to leave the prince's residence. Duke Kedri mobilized the family knights. And everything they did was to rescue Kaina. Is Princess Kaina really worth that much?" Faced with Heilin's demonic stare, Gino Muens grew nervous. The princess must have her uses, otherwise why would Prince Rizef go to such lengths to save her? Hearing these words, Heilin smiled and said, "I thought the same. Princess Kaina must have something we don't know about that would make everyone go crazy for her." Gino Muens denied it. "That's absolutely impossible." As he spoke, Heilin burst into maniacal laughter. Then holding Gino Muen's hand, poured the red wine onto it. "We've all been played like puppets by this princess, and I find such a princess very intriguing." Heilin pathologically licked the red wine from Gino Muen's hand. "You must treat this princess well. If anything happens to my toy, I don't know what I might do." Gino Muens was too nervous to speak facing Heilin, because he knew this person was truly dangerous. Meanwhile, Kaina had just regained consciousness from her coma. "Rizef, where is this? What happened to those kidnappers?" Rizef held Kaina's hand saying, "All the kidnappers have been thrown in the dungeon. I will later hold Jillian's Viscounty accountable." Then Kaina sat up asking, "How long was I unconscious?" Rizef answered worriedly, "You slept for a day, you can rest more if you need." Kaina thought of Iwan who had come to save her. So it wasn't a dream after all. After pondering for a moment, she said to Rizef, "How is your confinement order? Did His Majesty allow you to go out?" Rizef was somewhat annoyed by his sister's commanding tone. But he held back, just smiling faintly. Sister need not worry about this matter. Hearing these words, Kaina became anxious. "Wait, Rizef, what do you mean by that?" Kaina frantically grabbed Rizef's cloak. This action exposed the gun at his waist. Kaina was greatly shocked. "Rizef, what's with this gun? What exactly are you planning to do?" While Rizef expressionlessly took out his weapon. "Does sister think His Majesty will pardon me?" Kaina hurriedly said, "Go back to the prince's residence first. I will persuade His Majesty properly." These words reminded Rizef of something. He said somewhat disappointedly, "You mean persuade him like you persuaded him to give Iwan the governance appointment?" Then reached out to gently stroke Kaina's golden hair. "Sister, I'm not a child anymore." Kaina still worriedly comforted him. "These two matters can't be mixed together. I'm truly worried about you." Rizef asked why. At this moment Kaina kissed Rizef's hand. "Speaking gently, because you're my brother. So just do what I say please, okay?" Rizef seemed to find peace, closing his eyes to enjoy this moment. Then spoke saying, "Duke Iwan will help me resolve this matter." Kaina was somewhat puzzled. Father is a cold and arbitrary person. He doesn't allow anyone to defy his fate. Yet Iwan actually wants to resolve this troublesome matter. How will he resolve it? He doesn't seem to be supporting Rizef. After pondering for a moment, Kaina actually blushed. Could it be for my sake? Soon after, there came urgent knocking at the door. It was Olivia and Bella. Seeing the princess safe and sound, Bella grasped Kaina's hand and fell to her knees with a thud. "Princess, I'm so relieved you're all right." Kaina comforted her saying, "I'm fine, you don't need to panic." Olivia beside her hesitated. Then knelt down and said, "Please punish me. I failed to protect you, it's all my fault." However, Kaina tightly embraced Olivia. "Thanks to you I'm safe and sound, thank you. You must have been scared too, right?" At this moment, Olivia's face was covered in tears. "It's so wonderful that you've returned safely." Kaina smiled contentedly seeing the two of them. Then planned to give Olivia some time off to rest at home. Olivia immediately shook her head in refusal. Speaking in a loud and firm voice, I want to stay by your side. I want to stay here, please agree, Your Highness. Kaina's heart instantly softened, and she agreed to Olivia's request. At this moment, a light cough broke the pleasant atmosphere. How long are you planning to stay like this? Olivia and Bella were startled and hurriedly bowed to Rizef. Rizef was somewhat irritated, so he sent the two away, saying he would take care of his sister. Seeing Rizef's reaction, Kaina was puzzled. By all accounts, Rizef and Olivia should have fallen in love at first sight. But now he seemed to be annoyed by Olivia. Kaina spoke up asking, Rizef, have you ever felt your heart race? Or your breathing become rapid, that kind of feeling? Faced with his sister's strange questions, Rizef was confused, looking at Kaina, who was staring intently, waiting for his response. Rizef said, Sister, I feel like you're not fully awake yet. You should go back to sleep now. An awkward atmosphere filled the entire bedroom. This made Kaina wonder if she had gone too far. After taking care of Kaina, Rizef returned to the prince's residence. Thinking of the earlier scene, he muttered to himself, it's really irritating. That woman called Olivia is so annoying. What are their purposes, all of them clinging to Kaina? Besides me, Kaina doesn't need anyone. I can't let them keep clinging to Kaina anymore. I need to gradually get rid of those unnecessary people. Then he reached for his waist. The next moment, Rizef became somewhat panicked, because no matter how much he searched, the gun at his waist had disappeared. Meanwhile, in the princess's residence, Kaina suddenly called out to Bella. Bella put down what she was doing and hurried over, only to find the princess trembling all over. Princess, are you feeling unwell somewhere? Your complexion doesn't look good. Kaina said fearfully, I still feel very uneasy. Pass down the order to increase patrols around the palace dungeon. Bella had planned to wait for the guards to come before notifying them. But Kaina said, go right now please, Bella. Bella nodded. Seeing this, it seemed the kidnapping incident had really frightened the princess. After Bella left, the previously fearfully trembling Kaina was now surprisingly calm, her face showing no expression, because she knew clearly in her heart, if she couldn't escape the palace, death would be her destined fate. So she had to end everything herself, break these cursed shackles. At this moment, Kaina decided to fight against fate, taking out the weapon she had stolen from Rizef. In the dead of night, Kaina came alone to the dungeon. She discovered that Burton Jillian's cell had no provisions, and the person inside had already disappeared. Kaina guessed he couldn't have escaped so quickly. He must be hiding somewhere. Just then, Jillian suddenly appeared behind Kaina, smiling sinisterly. Princess, did you come here looking for me because you missed me? While stepping closer to Kaina, Kaina threw away the oil lamp in her hand, drew out her weapon and said loudly, don't come any closer. I anticipated you would escape. People must pay for their crimes. Jillian wasn't afraid at all, instead mockingly said, I never expected the princess would point a gun at me. Your Highness, think carefully, who most appreciates your value? I guarantee no one will treasure you like I do, only with me can you find the greatest happiness. Kaina's face showed no emotion as she said calmly, I'm glad you haven't changed at all, this way I can kill you without any guilt. Then spoke angrily about things from before her rebirth. Being displayed and imprisoned like a decoration, having life controlled by your moods, you call that happiness? I don't want to die, so I must kill you here. As if his inner thoughts had been guessed, Jillian's expression became extremely twisted. I don't understand what you're saying. How dare you judge me when you know so little about me? Then he burst out laughing. Do you really dare to shoot me with that gun? You can't bear the consequences of directly killing a noble, can you? Kaina didn't waver, still firmly saying, I absolutely won't repeat my previous life. Under Jillian's terrified gaze, Kaina pulled the trigger. Jillian tremblingly covered his wound, shouting loudly at Kaina, You think you won't have to pay any price for doing this to me? At this moment, urgent footsteps came from outside the cell. It was the people who had released Jillian earlier. Kaina looked back, recognizing the severity of the situation. She was surrounded by these people. Jillian wiped the blood from his face, saying, You came at just the right time. Your Highness, let's hope your shooting skills are good enough. Otherwise, prepare to be captured by us. Kaina sighed and said, You're right. I've never shot at anyone before, so I'm no match for you. Then she reached into her bosom. Smiling, she said, You're so foolish. Did you think I would come to the dungeon without any preparation? Kaina took out a dagger from her bosom and held it against her own face. Beside her, Jillian screamed heartbrokenly, "Put down the knife, don't move." At this moment, Kaina laughed contemptuously. Looking at the trembling Jillian, she recalled past events with some self-mockery. "I used to be afraid of this kind of man, who would shake in fear just because I might harm my face. In my previous life, no matter how Jillian tortured me, he would never harm my face. In the past, I would never have had the courage to destroy my own face. Because beauty was once my only reason for existing." At this moment, Kaina raised her eyes to look at Jillian. "Jillian, listen carefully. Make these two people back away immediately. If you don't do as I say, I'll cut my face." The other two men said, "Young master, we should leave." Then reached for knives at their waists. Jillian shouted loudly, "You two idiots, put those knives away immediately. I forbid you from touching a single hair on her head. If her face suffers even the slightest injury, I'll tear you to pieces." At this moment, a smile appeared at the corners of Kaina's mouth. "Jillian, you've done well, now give me the dungeon keys." Although Jillian was dissatisfied, he still complied, throwing the keys at Kaina's feet. Then said, "I've done as you asked. Now you should put down the knife, right?" Kaina only replied coolly, "We're not done yet. Turn around and kneel down right where you are." Jillian did as told. Kaina walked towards him unhurriedly. "Very good, stay just like that." Then she bent down to pick up the keys. At this moment, Jillian suddenly jumped up, trying to knock her unconscious. However, the next moment, a bang echoed throughout the palace dungeon. Jillian fearfully lay on the ground. But there was no pain anywhere on his body. What was going on? Had she shot at the ceiling? Suddenly, urgent footsteps came again from outside the dungeon. It seemed the gunshot had attracted the guards. At this moment, Kaina calmly opened the cell door. Then said to Jillian, "Were you scared? I had already ordered increased patrols before coming. You won't be able to escape no matter how you try." Then she locked herself in the cell. "Oh right, let me give you one last gift. You should find this useful on your journey to the underworld." Jillian's eyes were filled with terror. The next moment, Kaina in the cell shouted loudly for help, "Someone come quickly, save me." The guards who arrived found the princess locked in the cell. They hurriedly spread out to block the exits. The guards once again subdued Jillian. Kaina in the cell saw this scene and smiled with satisfaction. However, this subtle gesture was seen by Jillian. Grinding his teeth in anger, he said, "That crazy woman actually set me up." A guard released Kaina from the cell. "Princess, we'll escort you back to safety." Watching Kaina's retreating figure, Jillian cried out in heartbreak and despair, "Don't go, my Kaina, please." At this time, Rizef actually came out personally to receive her. "Sister, are you all right?" Just as Kaina was about to speak, Rizef tightly grabbed her shoulders and asked, "Sister, why were you here?" A soldier nearby explained, "Burton Jillian kidnapped the princess again and tried to kill the princess with this gun." Rizef was surprised to see the gun. "Isn't this the gun I lost?" At this point, Kaina whispered to Rizef that gun was illegal in the first place. "Disposing of it this way helped you." Rizef frowned, somewhat displeased. Then said to the guard, "I'll take the princess back, you go handle the aftermath." After the soldiers left, Rizef said seriously, "Sister, you must explain the current situation to me. You should have been resting. Why did you come here? How did you get kidnapped by Jillian again?" Kaina turned her head away. "I wanted to kill him myself. I really can't forgive him." "Rizef, you don't know how scared I was that day. The way he looked at me made me feel sick. When his hands touched my skin, I couldn't help but shudder." At this moment, Kaina's thoughts were somewhat chaotic. Memories from her previous life overlapped confusingly with today's events. After pondering for a while, Kaina continued, "If you hadn't come to save me, I dare not imagine the consequences." Rizef gripped Kaina's arms forcefully. "Sister, what strange things are you saying?" The next moment, Kaina hugged Rizef tightly, speaking in a pleading tone, "I hope you can protect me. Don't let these things happen again, can you promise me?" Kaina knew this was the first time since her rebirth that she had told Rizef the truth. If she was rejected, she would once again walk towards destruction. However, fate changed. Rizef hugged Kaina back. "Sister, I promise you I will protect you." Then gently stroked Kaina's beautiful hair. "As long as you stay by my side, you won't encounter any dangerous situations." Kaina felt relieved at this moment. The inescapable fate had finally been rewritten. "I was right after all, we can definitely do it. In this life we can find happiness." At Duke Kedri's residence, Iwin was intently reading a letter from his mother. After a while, he put down the letter and sighed. As expected of my mother, her implication is to hand over the family management rights to me. An attendant nearby shrugged and said, the lady can quickly grasp situations and make decisions. Truly worthy of being the real power holder of the Kedri family. Kedri didn't refute. Yes, she's worlds apart from my incompetent father. Tomorrow I need to see His Majesty alone. Go to the palace and request an audience. The guard acknowledged and hurried off to the palace. At this moment Kedri thought of his father. He loved another woman, and even after marrying mother he still maintained contact with that woman. When this matter came to light, it caused enormous damage to the Kedri family. Kedri once wanted to investigate that woman's identity. But there would always be someone interfering. This made him change his mind. Continuing the investigation might be dangerous. The next day, Iwan came to His Majesty's chamber. The emperor said, "Thank you for rescuing the princess from the kidnappers. If it weren't for you, Kaina would surely have lost her life." Kedri replied, "Your Majesty, I only did my duty." The emperor had anticipated this response and asked if he had any other requests. At this moment Kedri looked up at the emperor and said, "I request that you not punish Prince Rizef for defying royal orders to save the princess." The emperor laughed instead of getting angry. "This is Kaina's request, isn't it? You're really naive. Being so foolish, can you lead the entire duke's family well like your mother?" Iwan didn't understand why His Majesty said this. "You've been very attentive to Kaina lately. That child is gradually growing from a troublesome mischief maker into a true royal princess. It seems she can overcome any difficulty." The emperor continued laughing, saying, "Your expression tells me you don't understand why I'm telling you these things." Kedri didn't hide it. He indeed didn't understand. At this moment His Majesty leaned close to Kedri and whispered in his ear, "The real culprit who poisoned Kaina before was Rizef. And Kaina knows this was Rizef's doing. She perhaps thinks she can change Rizef and won't even hold the poisoning incident against him." At this moment Kedri's heart wavered. He asked in response, "That's absolutely impossible. Aren't they each other's support?" The emperor gave a contemptuous laugh in the face of enormous power. "All family and love pale in comparison. But I feel at ease in trusting Kaina to you." Faced with these words from the emperor, Kedri was somewhat displeased. "Your Majesty, the Kedri ducal family holds significant power. My existence might be a threat to Princess Kaina. You should know this, right? Yet you say you trust me. Isn't this contradictory?" At this moment, the emperor's expression became somewhat heavy as he said, "Iwan, Prince Rizef is not my child." This shocking secret left Iwan frozen in place, not knowing what to say. Then he asked, "If Prince Rizef is not your child, then whose child is he?" The emperor replied coolly, "Looking at his appearance, it shouldn't be hard to guess." At these words, Iwan's heart pounded wildly. He dared not imagine. Then the emperor looked at him, continuing with a smile, "Unfortunately, that man is your father." At this moment, Iwan thought of his father, whom he had rarely met. That appearance and arrogant temperament were too similar. Now Iwan was sweating profusely, afraid to speak. The emperor said, "Your father was once the previous empress's lover. After giving birth to Kaina, the empress once went to the warm southern regions. It was at that time that child Rizef was born." Iwan clearly found this news very difficult to accept. "I really couldn't raise him as my own child." Eventually, the resentment in his heart gradually spread to the entire royal family. Now it threatens even his sister's safety. Iwan pondered for a moment, although unwilling to believe. Now he finally understood. The princess was hiding from everyone, waiting for the opportunity to escape from this dangerous palace. Then the emperor said, "I know my days are numbered. I want to choose Kaina." Iwan clenched his fists and then requested, "Please don't choose Kaina as the heir to the throne, but instead grant her corresponding powers." Iwan considered that if Kaina became the heir, she would be caught between two forces. But if she was only granted power, everyone would only envy the princess's authority but not harm her. The emperor had also guessed Iwan's thoughts, then smiled and said, "You want me to give Kaina the ability to protect herself? Iwan, I'm very glad you could fall in love with my daughter." After some small talk, Iwan came out. "Duke Kedri, I've been waiting for you." At this moment, Rizef suddenly appeared. "How did things go with father?" Iwan struggled to control his emotions and said, "His Majesty has decided to forgive your defiance of royal orders." Rizef walked closer to Iwan saying, "You surprise me. You not only convinced father, but also suddenly inherited the duke's position. It's as if you hurriedly prepared everything to save someone." Iwan replied coldly, everything just happened a bit earlier than planned under the princess's influence. Hearing this, Rizef frowned. Then patted Iwan's shoulder saying, I owe you one this time. After Rizef left, Iwan's guard appeared from nearby, hurriedly supporting Iwan and anxiously saying, My lord, why do you look so unwell? Should we return to the residence immediately? Iwan said, Let's go to the princess's residence first. At this moment, Iwan only wanted to see Kaina immediately. In the princess's mansion, Kaina held a vibrant flower. With a sweet smile, she asked about the current situation outside. Bella quickly replied that the Jillian Viscounty had been detained, and many corpse specimens were found during the search. This matter couldn't be resolved with just a small punishment for Burton. Kaina had clearly anticipated Jillian's fate, saying that if he committed a crime, he should pay the price. Hearing the princess say this, Bella excitedly agreed, saying that such a bastard deserved to die. Then glancing at Kaina's flower arrangement, she asked, But are you really all right now, Your Highness? Kaina smiled and said, Thanks to your care, I'm much better now. At this moment, Bella seemed to remember something, asking, Have you decided to hold your coming-of-age ceremony without an elder lady companion? Kaina's expression became somewhat downcast as she said, If Lady Eliban won't come, I don't want anyone else. Just then, Olivia opened the door and called out, Princess, quick, look. The reply from Lady Eliban that you've been waiting day and night has finally arrived. Kaina specifically went to the garden to read this letter. Lady Eliban thanked Princess Kaina for her concern, and expressed her longing for Kaina. The letter stated, Whenever you need me, I will come to you regardless of time or place. At this time, Lady Eliban would only be able to meet Kaina after one day. Kaina cherished this reply letter dearly, holding it close to her chest while murmuring, I can finally see my wet nurse. As Kaina was immersed in the joy of soon meeting someone she missed, the sound of soft footsteps arose. Kaina was startled and immediately turned around. It was Iwan who had arrived, saying, Greetings, Your Highness. Kaina was just wondering how he got in. It clearly wasn't Bella or Olivia who let him in, which meant he had entered without permission. Why would he suddenly do something so presumptuous today? Before Kaina could figure out what was happening, the next moment, Iwan suddenly embraced Kaina, saying, Please forgive my rudeness. Kaina was somewhat shocked, but feeling his trembling hands made her puzzled. Why was he shaking? Then pushing Iwan away, she said seriously, Release me first and then we can talk properly, Duke Kedri. Iwan was surprised because Kaina had never addressed him this way before. He quickly apologized to her, but Kaina merely curtsied while saying, I should first congratulate you on inheriting the Duke's title. If I was discourteous just now, please forgive me, Duke Kedri. At this moment, Iwan felt very frustrated inside, saying, I don't want this. Kaina was surprised, not understanding why Iwan would say such a thing. Then Iwan held Kaina's hand and said, I only accepted the Duke's position for your sake, Your Highness. Please don't be so formal with me, just call me Iwan as you usually do. Iwan held Kaina's hand tightly, recalling what the Emperor had said about wanting to choose Kaina as his heir. Although the Emperor hadn't revealed his private intentions completely, Iwan knew. His Majesty had clearly planned from the beginning to use me, who had already obtained the Kedri family title, along with the princess who was in a difficult situation, to completely destroy Rizef. Iwan gently brought Kaina's hand to his face, then kissed it to show his determination. Iwan would never forgive Prince Rizef for trying to harm the princess. At this moment, Kaina blushed at Iwan's sudden action. After a while, Kaina smiled and said, Are you feeling better now, Iwan? Iwan, reflecting on his earlier behavior, felt very embarrassed. I was disrespectful just now, please forgive me, Your Highness. Kaina laughed and said, It's fine. Iwan glanced at the letter on the chair and asked, Were you reading a letter just now? Kaina picked up the letter and said, I just received a long-awaited reply. Iwan was startled and quickly asked who had written this letter. That could make you wait so anxiously. Iwan was clearly showing signs of jealousy. Kaina continued, This is a reply from Lady Eliban, my wet nurse who took care of me when I was young. Seeing how Kaina treasured this letter, Iwan asked, This Lady Eliban must be quite remarkable for you to value her so highly. I'm curious what kind of person she is. Kaina only gave a bitter smile and said, There's nothing special about our story. While Iwan showed great interest, so Kaina began to tell her story. This story was also Kaina's most important and happiest memory. When I was young, my father showed no interest in me, and my mother would only occasionally come to look at me. But every time she looked at me with eyes as if seeing some terrifying monster. I was often left alone in the vast palace, and the servants began to treat me perfunctorily. Except for Lady Eliban. I was very willful back then, always doing childish things to my wet nurse. Until one summer, something happened. Many servants were searching for Kaina in the courtyard, but they couldn't find her after calling for a long time. They thought Kaina had already returned to the palace. So they began to give up and planned to go back. At this time, Kaina couldn't make a sound no matter how hard she struggled, because she had been kidnapped. Lady Eliban saw the returning servants and asked, "Where is the princess?" One of them said indifferently, "The princess must be playing hide and seek. We should be able to find her soon." Lady Eliban scolded them, "What kind of talk is that? How can you be so irresponsible as to abandon the princess?" Then she ordered them to call the guards. After saying this, she turned to go look for the princess. At this time, Kaina was being gagged and couldn't make any sound. The two assassins repeatedly confirmed that this little girl was indeed the princess. But before they could get too excited, Lady Eliban came looking for Kaina. No matter how she called out the princess's name, there was no response. At this moment, the two assassins discussed, "Should we deal with that woman too?" When Kaina heard this, she began struggling desperately, finally finding an opportunity to bite the assassin's hand hard. The man threw Kaina to the ground in response, then said viciously, "You little brat, how dare you bite me?" Then drew his sword intending to kill Kaina. At this time, Kaina was trembling with fear and couldn't say a word. The two men approached Kaina while saying, "Rather than being sold somewhere as a slave, perhaps dying here would be a better end. Don't cry, princess. You shouldn't blame me but your cold-blooded mother." Just as the sword was about to strike Kaina, Lady Eliban arrived in time, using her own body to shield Kaina. Seeing things had become complicated, the two men immediately left the scene. Kaina looked at her blood-covered wet nurse with terrified eyes, could only tremble and watch, unable to do anything else. That night it started raining. Kaina curled up in the corner of her bed, remembering what the servants had said. "It's all because of you that Lady Eliban ended up like this, so you'd better not come around for a while." This made Kaina feel deeply guilty, believing it was all her fault. Just then, the door to the room opened. Lady Eliban patted Kaina, who was curled up in the corner. Kaina tightly grabbed the hem of Lady Eliban's dress, crying and saying, "It's all my fault. I'm sorry, please forgive me." Her heart was very afraid, worried about becoming alone again in this vast palace, with no one left to protect her. Lady Eliban hugged Kaina with concern, comforting her, "This is not your fault." Meanwhile, Rezef's people planned to take action against Kaina's wet nurse Lady Eliban. At this time, Lady Eliban was sitting in a carriage chatting with her maid. When talking about Kaina's childhood, Lady Eliban felt both pain and guilt, wondering if the princess had found trustworthy people around her. Just as the two were chatting happily, several men in black were watching them from the bushes. The carriage suddenly shook, startling both of them. Then the maid tried to open the door to see what was happening, but the next second her head was separated from her body. The sudden horrific scene left Lady Eliban too terrified to speak. "Nice to meet you, Lady Eliban." A cold greeting and a fierce-looking man wearing a black coat appeared. At this moment, Lady Eliban asked fearfully while trembling, "Who are you exactly?" The man in black didn't say a word, just grabbed Lady Eliban's hair and pulled her out of the carriage. "I don't think I need to answer that question. After all, you're about to die here. Who sent you?" Lady Eliban tried to stay calm and asked. The man in black held his knife to Lady Eliban's throat, saying coldly, "If you had just lived quietly in hiding for the rest of your life, it would have been fine. Farewell, Lady Eliban." Just as the man in black was about to act, a shadow appeared in time, slashing at the man in black. The man in black was very surprised to see someone come, but he didn't recognize that this was Iwan Kedri. Then, Iwan protected Lady Eliban behind him. While telling the confused Lady Eliban, "I'll explain the details to you later." Iwan had come here because he felt the carriage path was a bit rough, but didn't expect this to happen. "How did you find this place?" Faced with the man in black's questioning, Iwan said calmly, "I don't know what you're talking about." At this moment the man in black became furious, "Don't try to play dumb with me. Quickly catch that brat, don't let that woman escape." Then 3 or 4 men in black swarmed forward. After a fight, Iwan felt something was wrong. These people's skills weren't like those of ordinary bandits. At this time, one of the men in black shouted, "Boss, I've caught this guy's companion, it's a woman." Iwan was shocked in his heart. Why would Princess Kaina be here? Could there be other accomplices nearby? At this time, a man with a knife quietly approached Iwan. Iwan reacted at the crucial moment, avoiding vital areas just in time. The man in black whose face was cut grabbed Kaina's hair, angrily saying, "Since you won't listen to me obediently, then I'll make a proposal. Hand that woman over to me or I'll kill her right now." Kaina looked at the horrific scene before her, feeling extremely shocked in her heart. At this moment, the man in black roared at Iwan, "Quickly hand that woman over to me." It was only then that Kaina understood. So these people's target was Lady Eli Ban. Iwan endured the pain in his body and asked, "Who is behind all this?" The man in black smiled crookedly and said, "I have no reason to answer you. I see you're trying to buy time. I can tell you two are noble children. Just hand that woman over to me and I'll let you go." Kaina certainly wouldn't agree. She hurriedly shouted, "Absolutely not. I'm fine, you must protect Lady Eli Ban." Hearing the voice, Lady Eli Ban finally realized that the one being threatened by the man in black was Princess Kaina. Kaina continued, "This is not a request but an order." Iwan was startled. Seeing Kaina's resistance, the man in black pressed her to the ground, then put his knife to Kaina's throat, saying, "Looks like I'll have to start with you." Seeing this, Iwan immediately rushed forward. But being outnumbered, Iwan was blocked. He knew very well that if he acted now, both of them would be in danger. If it weren't for his injuries, he would definitely find a chance to kill them all. At this time, Kaina deeply hated herself. It was all because I summoned Lady Eli Ban to the palace that she ended up in danger. Kaina gritted her teeth and made up her mind, the responsibility for this must be borne by me. I cannot watch those I cherish sacrifice themselves for me. At this time, seeing Kaina's determination, Iwan said, "I cannot leave you here alone. Because I love you deeply," but unfortunately the last sentence was only muttered in his heart. Seeing the standoff, Lady Eli Ban said, "Sir Knight, please leave. The person you should protect is not me, please go save the princess. And please help me give a message to Her Highness, tell her not to forget what she told me that night." Then Lady Eli Ban turned toward the cliff behind her. Iwan tried to stop her, saying, "Wait, Lady Eli Ban." Kaina quickly raised her head, but what met her eyes was only her wet nurse's reluctant expression. "Take care, Princess Kaina." After Lady Eli Ban said this, she jumped off the cliff. Kaina's heart-wrenching scream echoed throughout the mountain village. At the moment of losing her wet nurse, Kaina lost her senses. She even forgot Lady Eliban's final expression. Seeing their mission completed, the men in black had no interest in Iwan and Kaina anymore. They quickly retreated with everyone. Iwan hurriedly came to Kaina's side, wiping her face with both hands, asking worriedly, "Are you all right, Your Highness?" Kaina, still in shock, said tremblingly, "Iwan, my wet nurse jumped down." Then she ran toward the cliff like a lost soul, but Iwan held Kaina tightly. "There might still be assassins lying in ambush, we need to leave this place quickly." Kaina still wanted to save her wet nurse, but after crying for a long time she calmed down slightly. Iwan surveyed the surroundings, then solemnly said to Kaina, "Princess, if you had to choose between a gentle lie and an unfortunate truth, which would you choose?" Kaina hugged herself tightly and said, "I choose the truth." After pondering for a moment, Iwan said, "From the tracks nearby we can see. Their target from the beginning was Lady Eli Ban." Kaina bit her lip, deeply hating the mastermind who killed her wet nurse. Iwan brought over the short swords left behind by the men in black. "This might help us trace where these people went." Kaina was attracted by the glinting object. But after seeing it clearly, Kaina's pupils dilated unconsciously from shock. Then she quickly picked up that ornament. The two returned to the palace in the pouring rain. Kaina's dispirited figure made Iwan's heart ache, but he didn't know how to comfort her. Kaina hid alone in the corridor, with the ticking of the clock. She returned to her room like a walking corpse. Kaina opened her drawer. Inside was an ornament identical to that short sword. This made Kaina completely despair. So the mastermind behind her wet nurse's death was Razef. Kaina laughed like a madwoman. How could Razef do such a thing? I'm his only sister. Why did he do this? Then she violently threw these two ornaments at the mirror. I trusted him so much, pitied him, loved him. He turned out to be just like before, hasn't changed at all. Kaina gently wiped away the tears on her face. From the beginning I could never escape. Being powerless and without influence, yet I foolishly dreamed of protecting those I cherish. How stupid. I need power, I need the true strength to protect myself. Looking at herself in the broken mirror, Kaina made up her mind, I will take everything Rizef has. The next morning, Kaina wanted to go to the church. So she ordered Olivia to prepare casual clothes for her. Usually, people thought of churches as places where noble ladies would go to pray for safe childbirth or good marriages. Olivia asked, do you need anything else prepared? Kaina turned around with a smile and said, no need, I plan to go quietly with just one servant this time. Don't let anyone know about my outing during this period. Hearing this, Olivia asked nervously, you mean we can't tell Prince Rizef either, right? Kaina's smile disappeared for a moment. Then with a full smile again she replied, yes, don't tell anyone. In the evening, Kaina set out in a carriage. Looking at the setting sun, she recalled what Iwan had said last night. Before her death, Lady Eliban had asked him to pass on a message, telling Kaina not to forget what they had said that night. Kaina clenched her fists tightly. How could I possibly forget those words she whispered in my ear many times? If this was Lady Eliban's last will, then I will keep remembering, even if those memories bring me pain now. Night fell and Kaina arrived at the church. The monk who came out to greet her was surprised to find it was the princess, showing some astonishment. Kaina said calmly, I want to make a donation to the church and pray for myself. Monk Lan was very happy to hear that the princess wanted to come pray, and gladly led Kaina forward. This church was in a secluded place in the suburbs. Apart from a very few nobles, almost no one knew about this place. It was said that this church was very efficacious and noble ladies often came. However, this place hid another real secret. Then under the priest's guidance they came to the prayer room. Kaina looked at the empty prayer room, walking toward the holy pool while talking to herself. Then took out a sword from her bosom, cut her palm, and let the blood drip onto the lotus in the holy pool. Kaina's purpose in coming here wasn't prayer at all. She wanted to use the church's true secret. Watching the blood drip onto the lotus drop by drop, Kaina said calmly, Master of the Black Garden, I want to make a deal with you, please respond to my summons. Then a rumbling sound arose and in the brilliant light appeared a man wearing a magician's robe. He was the master of the Black Garden, the great magician Bei. Bei looked at Kaina and slowly opened his mouth. Who exactly are you? Not many people know about me. Kaina smiled and said, does that matter? I just want to obtain magic from you. Before she could finish speaking, Bei frowned, used magic on Kaina and said coldly, lowly human, how dare you speak such nonsense here so presumptuously? Do you think I will grant your wish? Kaina wasn't panicked at all, slowly walking toward Bei saying, of course. Because I've brought what you need most here. I can help you save the Black Garden that's about to disappear. In this world magic does exist, but only very few people know about it. And the person before her was the strongest of all magicians in terms of magical power. After hearing Kaina's words, Bei sighed. You're the first person to discover that the garden is about to disappear. Continue speaking, if you dare waste my time, I'll throw you out immediately. Kaina knew very well in her heart that the other party was like a god who could enjoy eternal life. If she lied, she would definitely be exposed immediately. Kaina opened her mouth and said, I need magic and very powerful magic at that. Bei laughed contemptuously. Even if you just want to use a little magic, you need to contribute a lot of fertilizer to the Black Garden. You should understand that the fertilizer I'm talking about is human lifespan. Before Bei could finish speaking, Kaina calmly said, I will contribute all my remaining time to the Black Garden. This time it was Bei's turn to be surprised. Kaina smiled and said, I misspoke, not all of it. Just leave me 1 year of time, this should be enough for me to achieve my goal. Bei was somewhat puzzled, not understanding what Kaina was after. Kaina spoke coldly, because I've understood. Power helps me too little. Then tightly grabbed Bei's collar, saying with a somewhat fierce expression, all I can do is make others suffer some physical pain. With such weak power, I can't protect anyone. Think carefully about my proposal, this is your last chance to save the Black Garden. If the lifespan I give you isn't enough, then I don't need that 1 year, you can take more. Bei shouted, shut up. Then the barrier in the church shattered. Bei slowly opened his mouth, Princess Kaina Hill of the Paya Empire. I accept your proposal. Bei gently lifted Kaina's chin. Welcome to the Black Garden, the heart and lungs of magicians. After arriving at the Black Garden, Kaina felt very shocked. She hadn't expected the garden to be a real place. Bei asked with furrowed brows, are you afraid of water? You'd better prepare yourself mentally. After all, inheriting magical power is very painful. Kaina couldn't help but laugh. I really didn't know that. Bei slowly said, you can still regret it now. I will erase your memories and send you away. Kaina said calmly, there's no need for that, because no matter how many times you erase her memories, she will eventually find her way back here. Kaina took off her shoes and outer coat. Bei began casting magic and said, Kaina Hill, the moment you've been longing for to form a contract has arrived. Magical abilities will change according to the contractor's characteristics. Kaina asked with some concern, don't I have any choice in this? It would be a bit troublesome if I got healing magic. Bei said contemptuously, you don't need to worry about that. I can tell at a glance that you're definitely not the type to heal others. Then Bei used magic to place Kaina in the pool. Kaina looked at the scene in the pool with some regret. This place is practically ruins. Everything seems to have withered. At this rate, the entire garden will disappear before long. But before she could think more, the pain of inheriting magical power suddenly startled Kaina. It felt like her heart was burning. Those black thorns deeply pierced Kaina's back and transferred magical power into her. At the same time, the previously withered rose garden suddenly bloomed completely. This made Bei feel very incredulous. A mere human's lifespan could make so many roses bloom. Then he thought of a possibility. This woman must have had unfulfilled lifespans. She might have been repeatedly living the same life. How surprising. Even after giving up most of her life, she didn't show any hesitation. If it were ordinary humans, they would have run away long ago. Bei came to Kaina's side and said calmly, you're holding up very well. Kaina smiled and said, it does hurt, but not enough to make me unable to bear it. To be honest, I could do it again. Bei reached out his hand, intending to erase the black marks on Kaina's body. You don't need to pretend you're fine. After all, this isn't something ordinary humans can endure. Kaina thanked Bei, using her last bit of strength to say, you could have ignored me. When I return to the palace, I'll definitely find you the best ointment. Bei supported the fainting Kaina, whispering in her ear, you're tired, rest first. When you open your eyes again, you'll welcome a completely different new world. When Kaina woke from her slumber, a sharp pain came from her mind. Then, remembering yesterday's magic contract in the Black Garden, was that just a dream? Then she looked out the window and saw many fairy-like moonlights. Kaina slowly channeled her magical power. The great magician Bei had said that magical abilities would change according to the contractor's characteristics. Kaina looked at the magic power condensed in her hand and muttered to herself, let me see what I got in exchange for my lifespan. Actually, when Kaina decided to obtain magic, she hadn't hoped for magic that could summon fire-breathing dragons, or powerful forces that could cause blizzards. After all, those were only magic that existed in ancient times. But Kaina hadn't expected she would get such terrible magic as psychokinesis. Just as Kaina was feeling disappointed, Bei appeared in Kaina's boudoir. Kaina smiled slightly and said, did you come to check if I'm still alive? How thoughtful. Bei said calmly, try to slowly focus your attention on your senses. Becoming proficient with magic isn't an easy thing. To Bei's surprise, Kaina actually used psychokinesis to control his clothes and make him dance. Bei immediately scolded Kaina and told her to stop. Kaina smiled slightly and said, I'm sorry, I apologize, I was just feeling a bit frustrated. Bei glanced at Kaina and thought to himself, I really can't understand this woman more and more. Even with a magician standing before her, she doesn't show any special reaction. When faced with powerful forces, those in power can't help but feel greedy. She could have threatened me with the church like past royalty and forced me to submit to her. While Bei was lost in thought, Kaina suddenly used psychokinesis to operate the cosmetics around her and started applying makeup on Bei. Seeing that Kaina dared to humiliate him like this, Bei wiped off the lipstick and said, let's end the jokes here, princess. Human women are just so. Before he could finish speaking, Bei was shocked by the scene before him. He had clearly blocked the flow of magic, yet it had no effect on Kaina at all. Bei was very surprised, because only ancient magic could block his power. At this moment, Bei felt some trepidation inside. If Kaina's power wasn't ordinary psychokinesis, then the royal family's future. Meanwhile, after killing Lady Eliban, the men in black returned to the prince's mansion to report. When Rizef learned they had been discovered while dealing with Lady Eliban and had let those people go, without giving him any chance to explain, he directly slashed with his sword. Rizef said to the trembling Jameer, "Go to the princess's mansion now. Monitor my sister's every move there and report to me at any time. What she ate this morning, whether she went for a walk, how her mood was, if she did anything suspicious. You must tell me all of these without missing a single word." Kaina was still adapting to her magical power in the church. At this time someone reported that someone had come to see her. Kaina was shocked. That someone would come to such a remote place to find her. Had Rizef discovered so quickly? Then this person said, "He told me to tell you he is Duke Kedri." At this time Kaina felt even more uneasy. How did he find this place? Then after biting her lip and thinking for a moment, she said, "Go tell him I'm very tired today, ask him to go back." The reason Kaina didn't want to see Iwan was because if she saw him now, she might unconsciously want to rely on him. From now on, Iwan's figure would no longer appear in Kaina's destined ending. When Kaina returned to her residence, assassins came again, this one named Jadale. He originally didn't want to take on such tasks involving the royal family, but in the end was forced by other reasons to do such crazy things. Jadale's mission was to kidnap the princess, and the one who ordered this was Haylin. Now the church where Kaina lived was in his jurisdiction, and she came here without guards. Haylin saw this as Kaina challenging him. Jadale was somewhat nervous. After all, Kaina had been kidnapped once before, security might have become more strict. Haylin smiled maliciously and said, "I heard your sister's condition has worsened. You probably don't have the ability to pay for such expensive medicine, right? Are you sure you want to give up this mission? Or should I give this task to someone else?" And so Jadale still came. After successfully knocking out all the guards, he came to Princess Kaina's room. Just as he was about to open the door to go in, he suddenly felt someone behind him. Looking back, it was actually a suit of armor without anyone in it staring at him. This terrified Jadale. In his panic, his mask was also knocked off. At this moment, he saw Kaina sitting on the windowsill, with many objects floating around her. Kaina smiled and said, "Welcome, Jadale, I almost fell asleep waiting for you." Jadale saw the scene before him and thought he was having hallucinations. Kaina looked at the dumbfounded Jadale and smiled, saying, "Since you've come all this way, let me tell you a story." There was a highly respected and honorable knight in the empire. Even in the face of hardship or sweet temptations, his righteous beliefs never wavered. Until his young sister fell ill with an incurable disease. To save his sister's life, which hung by a thread, he needed the power of magicians who only appeared in legends. He had sworn many times that even if he had to turn the continent upside down, he would find the magician. Even if that magician possessed demonic powers, he would definitely make them save his sister. Jadale angrily stared at Kaina and asked, "How do you know all this?" Kaina didn't answer, continuing instead, "Make a deal with me, I can tell you how to save your sister. In exchange, you need to tell me Haylin's weaknesses, whether you believe me or not. You only need to know one thing, Haylin cannot save your sister." Jadale was still struggling internally. But he also knew that Haylin indeed had no way. If Princess Kaina was a magician, that would be different. Then he threw away the sword pointed at Kaina, kneeling on one knee and swearing, "As long as you can save my sister. Until my life ends, I will regard you as my only master." The next day after Kaina successfully subdued Jadale with her magic power, the church priest saw soldiers lying on the ground sleeping soundly. He angrily shouted, "Why are you all sleeping? Aren't you supposed to protect the princess? Get up right now." Just then, Kaina opened the door and walked out slowly, saying with a smile, "Good morning, everyone," looking at the radiant Kaina. The priest asked nervously, "Princess, was everything all right last night?" Kaina smiled gently and said, "Thanks to everyone, I slept very well. Do you need something from me this early?" The priest said, "It's about Duke Kedri from yesterday. Though we tried multiple times to persuade him to leave, he seems to have stayed in the parlor all night." Kaina's heart suddenly quickened upon hearing this news. Had he really waited for her all night? The priest continued, "I told Lord Kedri that it would be difficult to see you these few days. So he asked me to pass this to you." Kaina took it and saw that it was a jewelry box. And inside was the necklace that belonged to her recently deceased nurse. Meanwhile, Kedri touched his head somewhat embarrassedly. He hadn't expected to come see the princess with his face covered in blood. Actually, on the day Kaina's nurse died, Kedri ignored his subordinates' objections and insisted on going to the bottom of the cliff to find the nurse's body, finally discovering the necklace and the nurse among a pile of rocks. Just as Iwan was about to ride away, Kaina called out to stop him. "Don't turn around, listen to me. Just answer one question truthfully. Has my nanny, Lady Eliban, found her peace?" Though sad, Iwan comforted her, saying, "Yes, princess. I will choose a sunny spot on my private land to build a tomb for her." "I'm sorry, but that's all I can tell you." Kaina smiled gratefully and said, "Iwan, could you help me put on this necklace? When I finally make up my mind one day, you must take me to that place." Iwan responded with determined eyes, "I promise you." Then, Iwan helped Kaina put on the necklace and gently picked up one end of it, kissing it while secretly vowing in his heart that he would never let her cry again. Meanwhile, after receiving the medicine given by Kaina, Jadale immediately went to his sister's side and administered the medicine to her. Jadale didn't completely trust Princess Kaina. Could this medicine really save his sister? Watching his sister's condition gradually improve after taking the medicine, Jadale recalled what Kaina had said. "When you're ready, come find me. I don't intend to become your new master. You should now become a sword that protects yourself." On another side, Duke Kedri came to the church again to find Kaina. Looking at the bright and vibrant flowers, Kaina said somewhat helplessly, "You come here every day. Is everything really all right at the Duke's mansion?" "It's been 4 consecutive days." Kedri replied shyly, "I handle all important matters the day before, so there won't be any problems." Kaina smiled slightly. "If this continues, what if troublesome rumors spread about you?" Kedri said seriously, "That's fine too, it would actually make you safer." Kedri stared intently at Kaina. "I don't believe you came here without reason. Besides me, those with keen insight will surely suspect you have some plans in secret." Then he took Kaina's delicate hand, kissing her hands back while saying, "So the news of you meeting me here will help easily divert outside attention." Iwan's concern made Kaina's heart flutter. She personally felt it didn't matter if others were watching her. But this way, Iwan would be caught up in royal family gossip. This would surely embarrass him later. Did he really not mind? Subsequently, the two entered a room to discuss matters concerning the Kingdom of Heim. The Kingdom of Heim is the center of exchange between the eastern and western continents, with a large population and advanced shipbuilding technology. So I hope the Kedri ducal family can claim that land as their own. Iwan was somewhat shocked, although this proposal was intriguing. Buying it at full price would inevitably face bankruptcy. Moreover, the Heilin ducal family would never allow Iwan to do this. Kaina displayed a confident smile and said, "You need not consider these issues. I can let you have Heim without spending a single koi." Iwan looked bewildered, feeling it quite unbelievable. Iwan continued, "Currently there are barbarian tribes causing trouble at Heim's borders. Heim's lord only knows how to flee everywhere, and the national treasury is almost depleted." Kaina said, "You're right, and that's precisely why Heim needs a strong family for protection. If you can take Heim's lord as your vassal and give him appropriate wealth and power, then you can more easily hold Heim in your grasp." Iwan said seriously with concern, "Though that may be true, it's not simple to execute. Moving so many troops at the border could very likely become the spark that ignites war. I cannot bear such an enormous risk." Just then, Kaina said, "You don't need to bring troops to Heim. The ones needing troops are here." After speaking, Kaina turned the map over. Iwan looked at the places marked with red crosses on the map, which were around the church. Kaina slowly moved closer to Iwan and softly said, "See those places marked in red on the map? That's where." This news shocked Iwan. "Where did you get this intelligence from?" Kaina smiled and said, "Some people provided me with assistance. Honestly, I never expected he would bring me such crucial intelligence." On another side, Heilin slowly said, "Jedemi, I finally found you," then tightly grabbed his neck and said viciously, "4 days ago I ordered you to bring the princess back. You knew the consequence of defying me is only death. Yet you still cut off contact with me for 4 consecutive days. And even came back empty-handed. Shouldn't you explain yourself?" Looking at the documents the person before him presented, he said calmly, "You say you stole these documents from the princess?" Jadil carefully answered, "This is also why I've been hiding until now." Actually, these documents were what Kaina had given to Jadil. Heilin smiled slightly after reading them. "This is truly surprising. Jadil, you've done very well. If what's written in this report is true, then the Janamovans are finished. The documents recorded evidence of the Mevins family's tax evasion and illegal herb cultivation. The Mevins family also had connections with Bert and Jillian, who had previously kidnapped the princess. Heylin tightly grabbed Jadil's face and said, "I'll give you one last chance. Go confiscate the Mevins family's illegal herbs yourself. This is your opportunity to prove your true worth." Meanwhile, Kaina and Iwan arrived at an illegal gunpowder warehouse. Explosion smoke filled the entire area. Iwan held Kaina tightly and said, "Will causing such a big disturbance really be all right?" Because they were so close, Kaina blushed and said, "This will help with your subsequent actions. After all, if Heylin is busy dealing with the aftermath, he won't have time to pay attention to you." The chaotic crying drew Kaina's attention. She saw soldiers forcibly taking away children from here. Kaina asked in confusion, "Why are there so many children here?" After a moment of silence, Iwan said, "These children were all taken from the commoner districts to work as forced labor. This is the best method of tax evasion." Just as the soldiers were about to kill a small boy, Kaina used magic to teleport in front of the boy. Iwan exclaimed in surprise and the guards immediately stopped. "The princess is here, everyone withdraw." The two children nervously looked at the beautiful woman before them. Kaina asked, "Can you tell me how you came to be here?" The little boy shouted angrily, "Why should I tell you? You'll just separate us anyway." Kaina smiled and said, "I promise I won't do that." The little boy sneered, "How ridiculous, I know too well how you nobles operate. You don't feed us, only make us work day and night. Now why are you taking us away?" After hearing this, Kaina fell silent for a moment and asked, "Iwan, what will happen to these children?" Iwan said regretfully, "I'm sorry, I don't have the authority to manage matters in this area." Just then, Priest Danian said, "The authority over this place is in our hands." Kaina hurriedly asked when she saw Bei, "What's going on? Why did you come out?" Bei yawned lazily and said, "It's so noisy around here, I couldn't just sit by." Seeing Kaina conversing with other men, Iwan felt very uncomfortable. Does the princess have old acquaintances in this church? Who is this man? He not only gives off a unique impression, but he's also completely at ease in front of the princess. Who exactly is he? While Iwan was lost in thought, Kaina called out to him, "What are you thinking about so intently?" Iwan immediately realized his impropriety. "I'm sorry, princess, I was distracted." Kaina smiled slightly and said, "It's all right, I'll tell you again. First, investigate these people's identities, then cross-reference them with missing persons in this district. I must help these children reunite with their families." Priest Danian said, "This is a good place to block outside views. The security around here has become worse because of it." Bei nodded in agreement. "He's right. Since you helped us solve a troublesome problem, I'll hand all the children over to you." Bei's commanding tone made Iwan quite displeased. Kaina quickly poked Bei, then defended him saying he's been staying in the church, so he's not familiar with social etiquette. Then whispered to Bei, "Be careful, people will get suspicious." Bei replied helplessly, "I don't think I'm being suspicious." Then Kaina jabbed Bei again forcefully. Bei laughed and said, "Oh, come on. You're the only human in this world who dares treat me like this." Then patted Kaina's shoulder. At this moment, Iwan couldn't hear any surrounding sounds. He kept thinking, there's actually someone the princess treats so casually. Who is he? Thinking back to how Kaina treated him before, Iwan felt a sting in his heart, because the princess had never treated him like this. Kaina said to Iwan, "Then I'll leave the children's matter to you. Although this will be time-consuming, guilt should be borne by the guilty, the children are innocent." Iwan looked at Kaina with confusion. Why would the princess save children who have nothing to do with her? This will surely make things more complicated. Just then, a small boy ran over in panic saying, "Princess, it seems there's a carriage from the palace approaching. Prince Razef has come personally, it appears you need to return to the palace." Kaina bit her finger and muttered, "But I can't go back now." Bei comforted her, "If you plan to stay here longer, I can help you." Just as Bei was about to approach Kaina, Iwan quickly pulled Kaina into his arms. Then said calmly, "No need, I will kidnap you." Before Kaina could react, he grabbed her hand and got into the carriage. Kaina was confused internally. Did I hear wrong? He's actually going to kidnap me. What is Iwan thinking? At the Duke's mansion, the maid's enthusiastic gazes seemed to say, "This is our future Duchess." This made Kaina feel somewhat uncomfortable. But at least they hadn't encountered Razef's subordinates. However, what concerned Kaina more was Iwan's seemingly unhappy attitude. So Kaina had the maid lead her to find Iwan. Iwan, who had just finished bathing, had completely calmed down. He couldn't believe he had actually kidnapped the princess. Thinking back, he was so anxious that his body moved on its own to take the princess away. Now Iwan felt somewhat regretful, hoping the princess wasn't upset by this. Just then, there was a knock at the door. Iwan opened it without much thought. But he hadn't expected it to be the princess. Kaina was shocked to see Iwan's completely exposed body. Iwan quickly covered himself with a robe. While Kaina turned around with a red face saying, "I'm sorry, I should have waited in the reception room." After Iwan properly dressed, he continued, "I should be the one apologizing for keeping you waiting. But what did you want to tell me?" Kaina blushed, not knowing how to answer. She couldn't very well say she came because she was worried about him. After calming down, Kaina said, "About me rewarding you with Haim, you weren't disappointed, were you? After all, you've helped me so much lately. Besides letting me meet my nurse, you've done so much for me. Without you, I would have faced many more difficulties. But when I thought carefully, I realized you already have everything. Finally, I thought of Haim, only it would be sufficient to repay your kindness to me." Before Kaina could finish speaking, Iwan pushed her to the ground. "Princess, I didn't help you because I wanted repayment. When did I ever ask you for these things?" Iwan slowly moved closer to Kaina. Then gently held her hand. No matter what Kaina said, Iwan remained unmoved. Iwan was conflicted inside. He didn't know what he really was in the princess's eyes. What did he want to become to the princess? Iwan looked at Kaina beneath him. Why not just keep her locked in this mansion? No one else could see her, she would belong only to me. Just like this, keep her locked away where no one knows, let her eyes see only me. I want her to completely become mine. And I too can completely belong to her. Iwan caressed Kaina and said, "Princess, do you know? You always turn me into a bad person." Iwan resisted the urge to kiss Kaina's lips. Kaina pushed Iwan away and said, "You can't do this. You used to hate me so much, never wrote back to my letters. Even when we met occasionally, you would pretend not to know me, you even refused when I invited you to the ball. You treated me that way back then, yet now you do such things. Do you think this is appropriate?" After a moment of silence, Iwan said, "What should I do to prove it to you? I told you before I'm different from how I was." Kaina said coldly, "I don't need your proof. To me now, you're just a partner who can satisfy my needs, nothing more." Then Kaina stood up to leave. Iwan quickly said, "I still don't understand. You clearly saw through my illness yet didn't find it strange and even took care of me. You could have used this weakness as a weapon. After all, I've never told anyone this secret in my life. I'm curious how you knew. But more than that, I want to know if you're really the person I knew." Then, Iwan tightly embraced Kaina from behind, whispering in her ear. "I want to know everything about you, I want to know what you're thinking. Where you're looking, where your heart lies." Unable to bear such stimulation, Kaina turned and pushed Iwan away. "Why can't you understand what I'm saying? Are you stupid?" Iwan smiled slightly and said, "Maybe." Kaina laughed coldly, "I can't respond to your expectations. We're just using each other, someday we'll go our separate ways." Iwan continued, "No matter what path you take, I will follow you." Kaina angrily smashed a nearby vase. "Do you think these things are as simple as you say? What about your obligations as the head of the Kedri family?" Iwan caressed Kaina's injured hand and said, "If you don't mind, the Duke's title doesn't matter. Come to think of it, in your eyes I seem to be an immature child. Do you really trust me so little?" Kaina felt some wavering in her heart. Actually, nothing Iwan said was the real problem. Kaina knew the ending of this story. Fate cannot be easily changed, and I am not the one who can stay by his side. Kaina broke free from Iwan's restraint. Then said coldly, "Let's leave it at this. This is the most suitable distance between us. Perhaps it's hard for you to accept now, but soon you'll understand my words." This was the only answer Kaina could give Iwan, and it was also her true feelings. Iwan said, "You told me before that misfortune was yours to bear. From the moment I decided to stand by your side, whatever misfortune should be borne by me. So you don't need to worry about my feelings." Iwan finished speaking and directly picked up Kaina. The sudden action surprised Kaina. "Iwan put me down quickly, what are you saying?" "I told you to put me down." Then Iwan pushed Kaina down again. Iwan said passionately, "You said you'll throw me away after using me, right? I'll wait for that day." Then gently took Kaina's foot and kissed it. Meanwhile, the little boy lied to Rizef, "The princess was just here." Rizef interrupted, my sister heard I was coming yet left me behind alone. Do you dare stake your life to guarantee everything you just said is true? Under Rizef's pressure, the little boy trembled. At this time Danian came out and said, Your Highness, please calm down. Princess Kaina went to the Kedri Duke's mansion. Bey stared intently at Rizef. Is that the Empire's crown prince? He certainly looks more like royalty than that woman. Actually, I don't want to help her, I'm just bored right now, why not play a little trick? Then used magic power to make all the horses go wild. Rizef was shocked. How could this happen when they were all tied up with reins? At the same time in the Duke's mansion, Kaina, who was pinned down, caressed Iwin and said, I'll say it again, I can't become your lover, but even so you don't care? Then with one move she pinned Iwin down. And kissed his lips. After their passionate encounter, Kaina slowly got up, then said seriously and sternly, I will become the emperor of the Paya Empire within 1 year. Iwin kissed Kaina's toes to show loyalty and said, I will wait for the day you abandon me. Meanwhile, Rizef's plan to seize the throne was also proceeding orderly. He had servants mix poison into the tea. He wanted the emperor to feel pain, not die easily. Supporting his broken body in agony just like the torture he experienced as a child. Then ordered his subordinates to dispose of the knowing maids. Kaina rushed over upon learning of her father's worsening condition. She knew this was Rizef beginning to act. But if the emperor died early then all her plans would turn to nothing. So she had to take initiative. She must get that thing today. Kaina came to her father's side with a panicked expression after entering. The emperor showed a relaxed expression. This is nothing, I'm just a bit tired. Kaina said apologetically, It's all my fault, I should have stayed by your side. Looking at the emperor's strained appearance, she could see vulnerabilities in the seemingly impregnable emperor. She must seize these vulnerabilities. Then Kaina held back her tears, forcefully saying to the subordinates, Are you sure there's nothing wrong with the medicine? Has the tea been checked? Kaina picked up the nearby tea and drank it all. Seeing the servants' panicked looks, Kaina calmly said, Have people check the medicine proportions from start to finish. Seeing such a forceful and orderly Kaina, the emperor showed an approving expression. Kaina sat beside the emperor and continued, If there are people in the palace who mean you harm, they shouldn't be allowed to live. The emperor said calmly, What if that person is your brother? Kaina replied coldly, Even if it's Rizef, I wouldn't let him live. The emperor saw the usually gentle Kaina become so forceful and domineering, he was extremely excited. The situation he wanted to see had come. Thinking of Kaina's excellent handling of state affairs last time, the emperor decided to give her a reward. He issued an imperial edict before everyone. From today forward, Kaina becomes my proxy. Power had finally come to hand. This was Kaina's ultimate goal. She could grasp the key to controlling her own destiny. At the same time, upon learning Rizef attempted to poison the emperor, Gino Mevins, who supported him, came angrily to question, Why didn't you discuss such things with me beforehand? How could you be so rash? Before he could finish, Rizef rode his horse to knock down Gino Mevins. Then said calmly, The emperor didn't die, what's there to make such a fuss about? These words made Gino even angrier. This foolish prince, having caused such trouble yet still being so righteous. Gino Mevins continued questioning, Prince Rizef, do you know Princess Kaina drank the tea for His Majesty? This is all because of your arbitrary actions. We should wait until I become Prime Minister before killing the Emperor. Rizef looked at him coldly. Gino Mevins had always treated Rizef as a puppet. He only wanted the Mevins family to become the Empire's new master. However, all these fantasies would soon come to nothing. Rizef laughed and said, My sister has already obtained the Prime Minister's authority. What a pity, I had such high hopes for you. They say this was the wish of His Majesty, who was once critically ill. Gino was full of questions. Why would the Emperor suddenly make such a decision? He grabbed Rizef in panic, saying, Now is not the time to be complacent. The princess. Before Gino could finish, Rizef grabbed Gino's wrist, asking, What's wrong with my sister? This left Gino confused. What was this guy up to? What was this bastard being so calm about? Usually he would have caused an uproar by now. Was this still the Prince Rizef he knew? Rizef turned to praise. My sister is truly remarkable. She dared to drink the tea without even knowing what was in it. Neither you nor I would dare even think of doing such a thing. Then patted Gino's shoulder, saying, You seem discouraged that my sister took the position. Keep trying. Gino felt very exasperated inside. Meanwhile, in the princess's residence. After gaining real power, Kaina didn't become complacent. Because from now on, the attention and scrutiny directed at the princess's residence would only increase. And now Kaina had no protective shield. Power without strength would eventually be swallowed by others. There was still a week until the state affairs meeting. The Mevin's family would surely gather lords to pressure me. After all, their plan to make Gino Mevin's prime minister had gone awry. Kaina muttered to herself, if only I had reliable allies. At this time a maid suggested, why don't you ask Duke Iwan for help? Kaina thought of Iwan's earlier words pledging loyalty. Letting her use him anytime, thinking of that night's events. Kaina's face immediately turned red. Actually, Kaina didn't want to keep troubling him. Just then a maid pushed open the door in panic saying, Prince Rizef is heading toward the princess's residence. Kaina knew clearly why he was coming. Since Kaina was reborn and returned to this world. Although she knew Rizef had harmed her, she still felt pity for him. Kaina could forgive him because he was her brother, her only family. Of course this was all Kaina's own assumption. Rizef held a bunch of white roses and smiled gently, sister, it's been so long since we've met. But everything Rizef had done made it impossible for Kaina to understand or forgive him anymore. Kaina smiled and responded. Have you been well lately? I heard you've been busy, what brings you here? Rizef teased, sister, those words hurt. No matter how busy I am, could I be as busy as you? You just returned to the palace and obtained the prime minister's authority. Kaina replied flatly, don't you know this is only temporary? Rizef said calmly, but I don't think so. If you really become prime minister and stay by my side. There could be nothing more reassuring. Seeing Kaina didn't respond. Rizef continued, actually I received a letter a few days ago. I thought I should deliver it to you personally. This letter's owner was your nurse, Lady Eliban. They say she committed suicide in her mansion the night before entering the palace. What a pity. She gave up a position that didn't belong to her. What can we do about it? Kaina could no longer stay calm. Because her nanny Lady Eliban was killed by Rizef. She forcefully pushed away Rizef's hand as he stroked her hair. However, due to using too much force, she knocked over the flower vase, cutting her delicate wrist. Looking at his sister bleeding, Rizef knelt on one knee, saying with gentle eyes, shall I bury the gardener in the flower bed? Or shall I blind your maid's eyes? Kaina found she couldn't understand Rizef at all. She calmed her emotions and said, I don't want to create chaos, you understand, right? Rizef nodded, saying, I understand, I'll listen to whatever sister says. After Rizef left, the maid Olivia came in. Just as she was about to call the royal physician, Kaina stopped her and said, Go give a message to Count Hamel now, tell Caitlin I have urgent business tonight. Olivia said worriedly, traveling at night will be dangerous. Why don't you leave early tomorrow morning instead? Kaina was tense, even one day's delay won't work. I must make this trip without anyone knowing, there will be more and more eyes on me in the future. If I go during the day, people will surely catch on. So I absolutely cannot miss tonight. Kaina and Olivia took a carriage to the Count's mansion at night. While helping bandage Kaina's wound, Olivia said, what a quiet night, though the palace must be quite different. Kaina agreed, that place is more lively now than ever. With the sudden change in power dynamics, others must be rushing about. Iwan previously went to subdue the barbarians of Heim. And the Heist Duke's son should be busy erasing traces left by the illegal gunpowder warehouse. Kaina said with a guilty expression. Thank you, Olivia, for always following me silently without asking questions. Olivia smiled and replied, I am your person, isn't this only natural? After Kaina arrived at the Count's mansion, Hamel came to welcome her. Hamel said calmly, actually, I was waiting for you to contact me. After all, I'm quite curious about Caitlin and Ethel, who became part of our family according to your wishes. Kaina instinctively looked around. It seemed this mother and son were living better than before. Hamel coughed lightly then continued, for some reason I'm quite excited. Having you both visit brings me such joy. The Count's family hasn't received several young guests at once in a long time. Duke Kedri and Ethel are both waiting for you. Seeing the scene before her, Kaina exclaimed in shock, what's going on? What's this atmosphere? Why is Iwan here waiting for me? How did he know I would come here? Upon seeing Kaina, Kedri showed a brilliant smile. This smile made Kaina's heart race. Before Kedri could speak, Ethel rushed out excitedly calling, "Sister Kaina, you finally came." Kaina smiled while stroking Ethel's hair saying, "Long time no see, you've grown so tall." Ethel said pitifully, "You don't know how long I waited for you today." Before he could finish, Kedri covered Ethel's head with his cloak. Then kissed Kaina's hand. "Greetings, princess. Don't you notice anything different about me?" "There must be something different, look carefully." Kedri kept talking about changes to his hairstyle, which surprised Kaina. He wasn't a child anymore, yet still saying such childish things. Ethel couldn't listen anymore and directly stepped on Kedri's foot. Facing Kedri's dark and terrifying gaze, Ethel chose to ignore it. "Sorry about that." Watching the two bicker, Kaina couldn't help but laugh. Both men turned to look at Kaina simultaneously. Kaina apologized for her impropriety, but still said with a smile, "It's all because you two are such fools." Hearing Kaina's evaluation, Ethel and Kedri were suddenly flustered. But in Kaina's eyes, these were all incredibly precious everyday moments. Although her heart was frozen, whenever Kedri was nearby, she would unconsciously become happy like a normal person. At this time, Kaina spoke up, "I'll go see Caitlin first. As for running into you here, I'll listen to your explanation privately later, Duke Iwan." Kedri. Then her finger gently slid across Iwan's palm. Before turning to leave, every time Kaina turned her back to Iwan, she couldn't help but ask herself, "How long can I deceive him? Can I really deceive him like this?" Kaina finished her business the next day. She wanted to return quietly. But unexpectedly, Kedri was waiting outside. Kedri asked if everything went well. Kaina asked in surprise, "You haven't been waiting here this whole time for me, have you?" Duke Kedri explained, "You're one of the reasons. But it's also because Ethel insisted on waiting for you." Ethel fought against sleep to wait for Kaina and muttered, "I absolutely won't hand my sister over to that wolf-like fellow." Kedri smiled and said, "Let me tell you something that will keep you wide awake. About the real reason I wanted to see you." Kaina was curious about what Kedri and Ethel had discussed. But Kedri indicated that it was a secret between the two of them. Then asked, "Princess, did you get what you wanted?" After thinking for a moment, Kaina said, "I came to ask Catherine to be my senior lady-in-waiting." Rizef told her about the obituary of her wet nurse just to get Lady Dorothy into the palace, to perfectly control and monitor everything about Kaina. Although Kaina felt sorry about dragging Catherine into this, she had no choice if she wanted to stop Rizef. Kaina bit her lip lightly to stay alert. Now was not the time for hesitation. But the next moment, Kedri kissed Kaina and said, "You don't need to worry too much, no matter what happens. I will protect you." Kaina felt somewhat guilty, but still managed a smile and said, "Having your word makes me feel much more at ease. Though you have more than one or two things to explain to me, I must return to the palace before dawn. So tell me next time." Seeing Kedri continuing to look at her, Kaina asked, "Why are you staring at me like that?" Kedri explained innocently, "You look exhausted, I'm wondering if you're feeling alright." Kaina shyly turned her face away. "I'm fine, but more importantly, the way you're staring at me is a bit." Seeing Kaina's blushing expression, Kedri couldn't help but take her hand and gently kiss it, gradually kissing up to her wrist. Faced with Kaina's panic, Kedri said, "If you don't like it, just push me away. You can tell me to stop anytime." Seeing that Kaina didn't stop him, Kedri kissed her neck, lifting her hair. Feeling Kedri's warm breath, Kaina's heart began racing. Being this close, she could hear Iwan's thoughts. Kedri lifted Kaina's chin, then kissed her, feeling the warmth on his lips. Kaina wanted to say this wasn't right, but she couldn't push Kedri away. Yet she also didn't want to see him hurt. "I really wish I could forget everything. Both the past and all the things from my previous life. I wish I could forget it all and gain freedom. If only time could just stop at this moment." Just as the intimate atmosphere between Kaina and Iwan reached its peak, Kaina shyly said, "Iwan, actually I've felt this way about you since long ago." But before she could finish, Kaina discovered that Iwan had become motionless. No matter how she called out, he remained unresponsive. Kaina looked around and found that everything except herself, all things in the world had stopped. The warm breath, gentle heartbeat, or even the faint sound of insects. She could no longer feel those things. Given that only she was normal, it must have been her doing. Perhaps the power she originally gained wasn't simply telekinetic magic. At this moment, a black cat appeared in the tree. "I knew this would happen. I sensed unstable magical flow, so I came to check." And it truly confirmed my suspicions. Kaina recognized the black cat's voice. It was the great magician Bei. Bei spoke calmly. Looks like I came at the right time. You seem to have many questions. But time is short, so let me explain briefly. I told you that magical abilities would change according to the contractor's characteristics. Though I don't know what kind of life you lived before, the power I gave you seems more dangerous than I imagined. What you possess is the magic to control space and time. Kaina finally understood that she could stop time whenever she wanted. Bei stretched and said, although you cannot turn back time or peek into the future, you can freely use the ability to freeze time. What you thought was telekinesis is actually the power to freely cut and manipulate time. This means you, as a human, have obtained power that could rival the gods. Kaina sighed while looking at the frozen Iwan. How amazing, why didn't I discover this earlier? With this power, there's nothing I can't do. An absolute power that would give me an advantage against any force. Just as Kaina was feeling pleased with herself, Bei interrupted, though this may spoil the mood, I must now explain why time is short. The next moment, blood spilled from Kaina's mouth, and tattoos and intense pain spread throughout her body. Bei continued, this magic is extraordinary, not something a human body can handle. Even if you sacrifice more of your lifespan, it's not a power meant to exist in this world. Since you've made a contract with the Black Garden, you must pay a price. If you can't learn to control this magic, forget about a year, you won't even last a month. Just maintaining this state is shortening your life. Bei gently stroked Kaina and said, I'll help you just this once. Next time even I won't be able to do anything. Bei's voice echoed in Kaina's ears as she slowly opened her eyes. Princess Kaina, remember. If you want to fulfill your wish unless absolutely necessary, you must never use this power. Kaina rose and smiled. So this isn't something to be happy about, but rather adds more risk. Then Kaina gently caressed Iwan's face. Tears falling uncontrollably. Iwan, I'm sorry, how did I drag you into this muddy fate? Now I don't even know what to do with you. Late into the night, Kaina was still busy. Olivia worriedly said, you haven't rested at all since returning from Count Hamel's mansion. Kaina interrupted while flipping through books, I'm fine. There are less than 2 days until the State Council meeting, I must be thoroughly prepared. But Kaina's thoughts were elsewhere. She recalled how she hadn't even seen Iwan's expression clearly last night because she was too panicked. Was he frightened? Kaina felt there were more and more things she couldn't tell him. Her thinking slowed and gradually she began nodding off from physical and mental exhaustion. At this moment, Rizef's image flashed through her mind. She couldn't understand why Rizef was so obsessed with her. In her previous life, he didn't care about her at all. There was no sibling affection between them, which is why he abandoned her so cruelly. What was puzzling was why father hated Rizef so much. She felt like she was missing something. Could there be memories she hadn't recalled? She wanted to know what Rizef really wanted. But the next moment when she opened her eyes, just as she was about to open the book to continue reading the materials, she found it was a picture book. Inside were drawings of her favorite cartoon characters. At this point, Kaina realized she had entered a dream. This memory was from when Kaina's wet nurse, Lady Ilaban, had just left the palace and she was alone in that building. Kaina carefully opened the door and walked out. Just then a strong wind blew. After managing to open her eyes, she saw Rizef standing on the edge of the balcony. Seeing Rizef covered in wounds, swaying back and forth on the window ledge, Kaina instinctively called out, Rizef, no, what are you doing? Then hugged him tightly from behind, pulling him back to safety. Kaina gasped for breath while angrily saying, how dangerous to stand in such a high place, what were you thinking, why would you do such a thing? The familiar words and scene that came out made Kaina pause. She seemed to have seen this scene before. Rizef coldly raised his head. I should be the one asking, why are you wandering around at this time? Don't you usually stay in your room reading childish fairy tales? Faced with Rizef's mockery, Kaina clenched her small fists. The pink princess isn't childish. Looking at the familiar yet strange Rizef before her, Kaina was certain this must be her forgotten past. But did Rizef originally have so many wounds? To stand firm in the State Council meeting, Kaina had made thorough preparations. But what Kaina hadn't expected was Iwan's appearance. Meanwhile, the ministers were still discussing Kaina at the State Council. It seems the news about His Majesty appointing the princess as his proxy is true. What could His Majesty be thinking? At this point, Prime Minister Debbie said dismissively, just wait and see. After today, Her Highness should realize that matters in the inner palace are mere household affairs. And this place where the nation is governed, how could it be somewhere a mere woman can casually enter? Two other ministers began nodding in agreement, saying, "Yes, we absolutely cannot let this happen." Beside them, Gino Mevins was thinking about how to make Kaina lose face. Today was the perfect opportunity to demonstrate the Mevins family's influence. After all, without supporting forces, Princess Kaina didn't even have the right to speak. At this time, someone at the meeting mocked Princess Kaina. She still hasn't shown up, probably been busy with makeup and dressing up since early morning. Perhaps she plans to waltz at the meeting? Just then, Kaina walked in saying, "I see everyone arrived on time. What were you all discussing so happily?" Looking at Kaina's escort, Gino Mevins was somewhat shocked. Why would Duke Kedri escort the princess here? Actually, when Princess Kaina was about to head to the State Council, Iwan had arrived at the princess's mansion in a carriage. When Kaina first saw Iwan, she was also surprised. Iwan slowly walked up to Kaina and said, "Princess, I will personally escort you to the venue." Kaina lightly hit Iwan, then said, "How did you come here? Besides my maids, no one knew my departure time." Iwan remained mysterious, not revealing why he knew. Of course, it was because he had planted his own eyes around Kaina. After a moment of silence, Iwan seriously said, "You once said you would ascend to the throne, so you definitely wouldn't miss such an important occasion. But the timing of appearing at the meeting is also important, so I merely thought this was the most suitable time." Then looked pitifully at Kaina and said, "You wouldn't send me back, would you?" Back to reality. Although some things felt wrong to Kaina, for now she would turn a blind eye. After the meeting officially began, Prime Minister Debes stood up and said, "This is today's urgent proposal. The major lords demand a rediscussion of the Central Army's budget. Most lords believe that since we're not at war, the Central Army's management costs are far too enormous." Before he could finish speaking, Knight Commander Jed stood up and cursed. At this point, Prime Minister Debes sneered, "Please calm down. I'm merely saying the budget is insufficient and needs adjustment. Why such a strong reaction?" Jed angrily grabbed his collar. "You irresponsible fellow. I see you've been sitting at your desk too long, that's why you say such foolish things." Kaina watched their argument with helplessness. Is this the State Council? Endless arguing and physical fights? Is whoever shouts the loudest the winner? At this time, Evan saw Kaina's frowning expression. Immediately drew his sword and asked her, "Are you alright? Should I eliminate everyone here?" Kaina urged him to calm down. Sometimes she couldn't tell if he was joking or serious. Then Kaina's attention was drawn back to the two arguing men. Watching them babble endlessly without reaching any conclusion, Kaina suddenly slammed the table. "I'm getting more confused as I listen. I wonder, do you all act like this in front of His Majesty too? The Central Army serves as the fortress protecting the Paya Empire, yet you say you're reluctant to pay taxes to them." At this point, Gino Mevin stood up emotionally saying, "How can you speak like this?" Others joined in discussing, criticizing the princess for speaking too harshly. However, Kaina smiled faintly and said, "Everyone, please calm down. I speak this way only because several points perplex me." Prime Minister Debes asked puzzled, "Could your highness share what these issues are?" Seeing the prime minister's initiative to ask, Kaina felt relieved. After all, central power comes from the Lord's support. These people who seem loyal would immediately leave if their power and interests weren't guaranteed. In that case, both the nation's position and her plans would be in jeopardy. Then Kaina placed a document on the table. "Of course I'll tell you, after all, I'm not here for idle chat. I've observed the capital's recent situation and noticed the population has tripled lately. I wonder if this is because the plague that long tormented the people has gradually subsided." At this point, Gino Mevins cut in saying, "Speaking of this, Prime Minister Debes is a great contributor. After all, this was all thanks to the Prime Minister's reorganization of the sewers." But Kaina didn't take the bait and coldly retorted, "I'm not trying to praise this matter. The current problem is that the city hasn't had any development. Yet the population keeps increasing. Due to soaring housing prices, people with nowhere to go have built slums, often engaging in illegal activities. Isn't that right, Commander Jed of the Knights?" Jed confirmed, "You're correct. The capital's security has deteriorated drastically, especially in the past 5 years. Gino Mevins was shocked to see Kaina speaking so eloquently. How could a girl who spent all day in the palace know these things? Then he spoke up, governing a nation is a very complex matter. We'll discuss countermeasures slowly. Kaina laughed scornfully, but nothing has changed in these 5 years, has it? Gino Mevins frowned and asked, do you have any solutions? Kaina had successfully turned from defense to offense, taking control of the situation. Then she presented her own proposal. I've also considered what would be the perfect solution to satisfy everyone. Gino Mevins was still absorbed in his own world, believing Kaina couldn't possibly come up with such a solution. Kaina confidently said, deploy the Central Army to lead the people in land reclamation. Then provide them housing in the new city instead of wages. Wouldn't that be attractive? This way, not only can we maintain the army, but it would also greatly help maintain the capital's security. Gino Mevins looked at Kaina's near-perfect policy with gritted teeth. According to plan, today should have shown everyone the princess's lack of qualification to be prime minister. He couldn't understand how things had turned out this way. After the state council meeting, Gino Mevins angrily grabbed Kaina's wrist and said, what exactly are you doing? Kaina shrugged and said, I have no idea what you're talking about. You've been glaring at me throughout the meeting. Why are you angry? These words made Gino Mevins even more annoyed. Stop pretending. You think I don't know what you're plotting? Others might be fooled, but not me. You think I don't know you're coveting the position of official heir? Gino Mevins was so emotional because he feared the princess's power would gradually grow. That would put Rizef at a disadvantage in the succession struggle. So he had to nip it in the bud. Then he threatened Kaina, you'd better be careful. If Prince Rizef learns of this. Before he could finish, Kaina laughed out loud, I really don't understand what you're saying. Is someone in your position qualified to speak like this? Just then, Rizef happened to appear not far behind Kaina. Kaina continued, I'm quite curious actually. If Rizef learns that the person who brought Burton Jillian into this and ordered him to kidnap me was you, Gino Mevins, what would his reaction be? Rizef heard very clearly. He stood there completely stunned. What would Rizef do next? After the state council meeting, the Gino Mevins family fell almost instantly. The maid spoke up, Princess, have you heard? A large-scale seizure and search of the Mevins family has begun. They say the charges are suspicion of growing and illegal trafficking of prohibited herbs. Kaina wasn't at all surprised by this outcome, only that things developed so quickly. It seems that person couldn't wait to leak the intelligence to the eldest son, who says loyal dogs won't betray their masters. Growing prohibited herbs is a serious crime. Let alone Debaisi, who worked hand-in-hand with the Mevins family, even royal family members couldn't protect him now. The maid sighed and said, the prince must be having a headache, right? Kaina paused. She had deliberately let Rizef hear those words yesterday. Then said meaningfully, he should be busy dealing with another matter, right? What about Julia? Go find her. If you learn of her whereabouts, be sure to tell me. Meanwhile, Julia had disguised herself and came to a rundown tavern, where Gino Mevins was hiding at this time. Julia asked loudly, what's going on? Why are you in a place like this? Gino Mevins impatiently said, lower your voice. Did you bring what I asked for? Julia hesitated before taking out a bag of gold coins. Gino Mevins immediately snatched it, then stood up somewhat unsteadily. Julia asked worriedly, what are you going to do with this money? I'm worried about you, please explain it to me. However, what she got in return was a slap from Gino. Gino Mevins spoke disdainfully. You little girl, try to meddle in family affairs. Don't let me see you again being so presumptuous before me. After all, you're only fit to chase after men's tails like before. Gino Mevins clutched the money in his hand. He really couldn't understand how things had become so terrible. The prohibited herb farm couldn't have been discovered so easily. Could all this also be Princess Kaina's scheme? At this time, Gino Mevins came to an underground room, where a man in black complained, you're late. Gino Mevins sighed, who told you to call me to such a place? The man in black said calmly, I had no choice after all. The alleys are now full of soldiers looking for you. Hearing this made Gino Mevins furious. This was all thanks to Kaina. That stupid Prince Rizef. His despicable sister made him lose his head with just a few words. It really makes my blood boil. Then he threw the money to the man in black. Then said with a fierce expression, I only want you to do one thing, that is to kill Princess Kaina. Make her suffer as much as possible. Make her so disfigured that no one can recognize her. Then bury her in the sewers, make her disappear from my sight forever. Just as Gino finished speaking, another man in black covered his head from behind. Rizef, who was in disguise, took off his hat and angrily said, "I really can't listen anymore." Gino's eyes widened. In his last moment before losing consciousness, he still couldn't believe Prince Rizef was here. After knocking Gino Mevins unconscious, they took him to a secluded grove. Gino Mevins struggled to stand up, then felt his foot touch something. Then he saw Burton Gillian lying in a pool of blood. Gino was terrified. Could he be dead already? At this moment, Rizef stormed over and said, "You're finally awake? I was just wondering what to do if you died like this. After all, I wanted to say goodbye to you personally." Then Rizef grabbed Gino's collar violently. Gino Mevins immediately knelt and begged, "Why would you do this to me?" Rizef smiled meaningfully and said, "Don't you recognize the man lying next to you? Your old acquaintances after all. A man who should have been rotting in a sunless underground prison waiting for death. Yet you used your authority to let him into the palace. Not only did you try to use him to kidnap my sister, but you even wanted to harm her." Gino tried to stay calm and said, "What are you saying? This absolutely isn't true." Rizef grabbed his throat hard and said, "I've told you many times, what I hate most is people who don't know their place. How dare you try to harm my person?" Gino Mevins finally realized that Rizef was completely insane. He was trying to kill him, then trembling, picked up a stone from the ground. Then suddenly struck at his head. "Don't you understand even now? Everything I did was for you. Besides me, who else would support a bastard like you to ascend the throne?" Before he could finish, Rizef shot him in the leg. Then mockingly said, "Your precious loyalty is truly touching. Is that all you have to say?" Gino Mevins burst into maniacal laughter. "You madman. Drop your act of sibling affection. You're the same kind as Burton Gillian. You just want to possess that woman for yourself. The one who doesn't know their place is you. I'm sure Princess Kaina thinks the same way. A disgusting prince of impure blood, someone like you could never have that woman." Then with a bang, Rizef ended Gino's life. Then muttered to himself, "You know nothing. Yet you keep spouting nonsense. I'm completely different from you all." But in reality, the matter of bloodline had struck Rizef's weak point. In his childhood, he had yearned for fatherly love. But his father would sit by his bed at midnight, strangling his neck violently, saying viciously, "Someone like you should disappear from this world." Inside Duke Kedri's mansion, Ethel came to visit carrying a sword. Faced with the soldiers' warm welcome, Ethel coldly said, "You can just call me by my name. The surname Hamel makes me uncomfortable," then sat down on his own. Though the soldier was somewhat angry, he could do nothing about it. But looking carefully, Ethel did look quite similar to Princess Kaina. Perhaps his bloodline was even purer than Prince Rizef's. At this time, Kedri happened to hear their conversation, then reprimanded, "Your words are too absurd. You must be careful what you say in front of others, young Master Hamel. I didn't expect you to come find me so quickly. Does this mean you've accepted my proposal?" Ethel hesitated for a moment and said, "You only proposed to be my teacher. Was there any need to leave such a precious gift?" I looked carefully. "This sword bears the royal family's crest." Kedri calmly said, "I didn't steal it, don't worry. It was given to my ancestors by the royal family long ago." Ethel seriously said, "I didn't come to talk about this. I'm not a fool, not stupid enough to miss the implications in your proposal." Then solemnly drew his sword with determined eyes, saying, "This time I'm the one asking you. Please help me become the heir to the throne, be my teacher." Kedri remained silent. Princess Kaina had once said in front of him that she wanted to be emperor. Kedri knew that Kaina's desire wasn't out of greed for power. There must be a deeper reason. Training Ethel to become the heir might not be what the princess wanted to see. But even once, if her heart wavers, I want her to be able to freely withdraw at any time. As long as it benefits the princess, I will do whatever it takes. Then he asked, "Are you sure you're fine with me? I thought you hated me." Before he could finish, Ethel cut in, "I do hate you. But someone told me that to protect family with one's own strength, it's not shameful to seek help from others." Ethel knelt on one knee and continued, "As long as it can make me stronger, I'll do anything, so please help me." Kedri smiled, then patted Ethel's hair and said, "Very good, then let me teach you how to directly confront those monsters in the capital. It's quite different from academy courses. And I'm a very strict teacher, you better be prepared." After dealing with Gino Mevins, Rizef returned to the prince's mansion that night. At this time, a man in black reported, "Your Highness, regarding the man and woman who appeared during Lady Ilaban's assassination. We have confirmed their identities, they were Princess Kaina and Duke Kedrich. After hearing this news, Rizef stared at the moon for a long time, remembering how Kaina had been so resistant to him before. Then muttered to himself, I see, so that was the reason. Sister, this time you won't abandon me and leave alone like that day, will you? When Rizef was 12, he was fighting an adult knight in the dueling grounds. Rizef successfully caught the man's weakness and knocked him down with an upward strike. At this time Rizef was full of hatred. He vented all his resentment toward his father on the man, immediately raising his sword without hesitation, ignoring the man's pleas and striking down. None of the people around dared to stop him. Just as Rizef was about to kill him, Kaina smiled at him. Are you still training? Rizef looked back, saw it was Kaina, immediately threw away his sword and followed Kaina. The maids nearby whispered, did you see that? Just moments ago he looked ready to kill. It seems Rizef only treats Princess Kaina specially. Rizef asked, Sister, what's in your basket? Kaina smiled and replied, these are things I secretly made in the kitchen today. There's too much for one person to eat, would you like to try some? Though somewhat reluctant, his body honestly ate it all. Then Rizef spoke up. In the future, let the maids do such things, it's not suitable for you. After a moment of silence, Kaina said, you said the same thing as Lady Dorothy. She said, as a princess I only have one duty, which is to become more beautiful than I am now. I don't need to do anything else. The palace is really so boring. Hearing these words, Rizef quickly grabbed Kaina's hand, then said seriously, Sister, don't worry, when I become emperor, I will definitely make you the happiest person in the world. However, the very next day many royal knights came to the prince's mansion. These people surrounded Rizef, wanting to forcibly take him away, then explained to him, the young masters of the Jarash and Klein families who were close to you have plotted rebellion. Therefore, these two families' properties have been confiscated, and all related personnel are already on their way to prison. Rizef couldn't believe it, muttering, they are my friends, there must be some mistake. However, the soldiers looked at him with contempt, then continued to command, take him away. At this time, Rizef also realized that father had planned this. How was his sister? Was she being taken away like him? Rizef hurriedly asked, where is my sister? Please take me to see my sister. Before he could finish, a soldier knocked Rizef unconscious. The commander ordered, from this moment until His Majesty orders otherwise, no one is allowed to approach Prince Rizef, not even Princess Kaina. After the soldiers knocked Rizef unconscious, they took him to a small house. At this time, several tall men came before Rizef. Rizef asked without hope, did His Majesty say nothing else? When can I leave here? Rizef saw the exchange of glances between those two men. Just as one of them was about to draw his sword, Rizef quickly lunged forward and stabbed the man in the kidney. The intense pain made the man cry out. This sudden action made the other two men step back. Rizef muttered, do you just keep repeating the same line like parrots? Unable to endure anymore, Rizef grabbed broken glass and charged at the two men. After an intense fight, Rizef subdued everyone. He held his sword to a man's throat and impatiently asked, what is your real purpose in coming here? However, the man laughed instead of showing anger. Don't you already know? We're just following orders to dispose of useless things. After hearing this, Rizef burst into maniacal laughter. So father truly wished for his death. No matter how hard he tried, it was all in vain. Everything he had done until now was just a waste of time. Then he muttered quietly, I absolutely won't let father have his wage. I must live on to become emperor. Someday I'll make that man die by my hands. After dealing with the men, Rizef ran frantically toward the princess's mansion. He was constantly worried about Kaina's safety. However, what he saw was the scene of Kaina together with Kedri. He didn't immediately go up to question them. Kedri asked, where is Prince Rizef? Kaina shrugged helplessly and said, I don't know, he suddenly disappeared without a word, and father won't tell me anything. Why am I always alone? In the end everyone leaves me. Hearing these words, Rizef could only cry out silently in his heart. Sister, I haven't left, I'm right here. At this time, Kaina suddenly grabbed Kedri's sleeve, pleading, won't you marry me? Then become emperor, I'll make you sit on the throne. If I beg father, he'll surely agree. But the prerequisite is that you must stay by my side, I don't need anyone else. If you can accompany me for life, then I will love only you forever. It hurt too much, Rizef's heart shattered. Back to reality. to ensure Kaina would never be alone again. Rizef wanted to possess Kaina for himself, she could only belong to him. Kaina actively invited Iwan to a secret meeting at the princess's mansion, and specially prepared a small boat. Iwan looked at Kaina lovingly. Has it been too long since I've seen you? I miss you. Kaina's face instantly turned red. Then calmly said, now isn't the time for us to be chatting and laughing. Rizef went to see Duke Halin last night. Kaina hadn't expected Rizef to make such a move. Two people who had long been enemies joining forces must be to bring me down. Then to achieve this goal, the most effective method would be to eliminate my helpers. And Iwan's thoughts aligned perfectly with Kaina's. Iwan suddenly understood. No wonder I've recently encountered several carriage accidents. This must be a warning to me. Kaina asked concernedly, are you hurt anywhere? Iwan calmly said, I'm fine. If that was a warning, their methods were quite cute. Kaina feared for Iwan's safety and couldn't help but advise again. The Duke is more dangerous than you imagine. Next time it won't end with just destroying a carriage. I really don't want you to be in danger. Iwan gently caressed Kaina's face and said, Princess, at least promise me this one thing. Don't let your sword be buried. I'm not afraid of anything. For me, protecting you is the most important thing. Kaina closed her eyes as if making some kind of resolution, then handed a brooch to Iwan. I won't let you do that. This time I'll protect you. No matter what happens, I will definitely protect you. Because to me, you are a very precious existence. You must carry this with you at all times. It will surely help you. Iwan clutched this brooch tightly, recalling Kaina's determined eyes from earlier. Iwan finally understood why his former self, who cared for no one and was cold, would fall in love with her. Because whether in the past or now, just being looked at firmly by these eyes, I would forget even who I am. What should I do? I clearly know such thoughts cannot be forgiven. And I also know what she fears most. Yet for her sake I can still give my life. Looking at Iwan, who was hugging her, Kaina called softly, Iwan, what's wrong? Iwan said gently, don't worry. Even in dreams I will never let you go. At this time, a lazy cat in the tree was staring intently at the two of them. So they're here? How absurd. It seems Bei was harsh on that human. He certainly hasn't disappointed me. After gaining power, Kaina finally welcomed her coming-of-age ceremony. She was getting closer and closer to the freedom she wanted. Looking at Princess Kaina becoming more and more graceful, the noble's words of praise were endless. At this time, Kaina happened to see the wound on Rizef's head. I haven't seen this wound before. You should take better care of your body. After all, you're no longer a child. I'm sorry I couldn't treat your wounds personally like before. Rizef looked at Kaina tenderly and said, so you still remember? I thought you'd forgotten everything from before. Kaina said calmly, how could I forget? That was the time when you and I were closest. Rizef gently held Kaina's hand. Sister, do you remember what I told you last time? Don't get married, stay by my side. I will give you a life where you won't need to envy anyone. Kaina smiled slightly, but that's not what I want. I've told you before. I will help you take the throne. I want to be free from any constraints. Rizef gently hooked Kaina's finger with his, then stroked his own face and said, Sister, you don't understand anything. Do you really think marriage will give you freedom? At this point, Kaina and Rizef had finished their entire dance. Those coveting Kaina's beauty began to stir. Everyone only cared about her beauty and power, all wanting to please her, but these words made Kaina feel sick. Actually, the princess's coming-of-age ceremony was just a banquet held for marriage. To possess the innocent princess who had just come of age, no one wanted to miss this opportunity. Kaina fought back her nausea, turned and ran towards the balcony. The naive Kaina once thought that the coming-of-age ceremony after her rebirth would be her life's blessing. But now it was exactly the opposite. The nightmare was just beginning. After running to the balcony, Kaina hurriedly called Bei's name. However, he was slow to appear. Bei, where are you? You haven't forgotten about pretending to be my fake husband, have you? Just then, a magic transmission circle suddenly lit up. An injured cat appeared in Kaina's arms. Kaina hurriedly asked, Bei, how did you get hurt? Bei had no time to explain, could only quickly say, danger. Get away from here quickly. Then another magic circle appeared. Numerous chains locked up Bei, who had transformed into a cat. Meanwhile, a cold voice rang out. The place you used your last bit of strength to escape to was actually beside a mere human woman. Was your promise to her that important? I'm disappointed in you. My dear brother. When this person appeared, Kaina instantly felt a pressure enveloping her entire body. Suddenly, a chain whipped towards Kaina. At the critical moment, Bei burst out with amazing magical power, holding Kaina in his arms, breaking all the chains. "Princess Kaina, leave here quickly. I'll deal with this fellow, you run." The man sneered, trying to escape again. "Brother, your words really make me sad." This person's sudden appearance and attack on her made Kaina particularly unhappy. Then coldly asked, "Your way of greeting is too extreme, isn't it? Who are you? Why are you doing this to Bei?" The man laughed instead of getting angry and said, "Are you the Hill family's princess? I've been looking for a long time for someone who could help me fulfill my wish. With mere human flesh, you not only saved the dying Black Garden, but also allowed time-space magic to evolve. This means you must have used a lot of your lifespan to make the trade, right? Maybe in a month or perhaps tomorrow you'll die immediately. You really signed an absurd contract. Brother, don't you agree?" The next moment, Kaina used time-space power to destroy the chains binding Bei, and warned him, "Seems you've investigated quite a bit about me in secret. If you have business with me, then say it quickly, don't torture my friend anymore." As the chains rapidly disintegrated, a few of them hit the man uncontrollably. The man was not afraid at all but said excitedly, "Don't be too careful of me. I'm here for one thing, to tell you a very important secret. According to the original destiny, you are already at the end of your life. But don't you feel aggrieved? Wasting all the time you have left in order to fulfill that one moment of vengeance." Just then, Kaina's maid came to the balcony and asked, "Your Highness, are you in there?" "The man is also taking it as it comes. I'm leaving for the day, but we'll meet again very soon. Because you will definitely come to me, don't forget I am on your side." Kaina couldn't think too long and turned around and opened the balcony door and asked, "It's so noisy outside, is something wrong?" Bella said with a serious look, "I have something to report to you. Mrs. Dorothy is in trouble after all. She's been buying cheap ingredients in bulk. And falsifying her accounts with her suppliers." Kaina frowned and asked what the reason was. Olivia replied forcefully, "She was supposedly trying to get a kickback and ruin the bar mitzvah at the same time." Kaina's heart is racing. Nothing is going according to plan right now. My attempt to borrow a fake husband to divert attention failed. Plus Bei's brother, what the hell did he mean by that statement? What am I going to do? Am I doing the right thing? Am I going to lose everything and end up in the same place as I was in my last life? While Kaina is at a loss for words, Olivia grabs Kaina's hand and says, "You don't have to worry about the rest of it." As soon as Bella found the case and made sure the evidence was intact, I immediately reported it to the police and sent out an investigative team. Lady Dorothy has been banned from the kitchen and will be punished as soon as the investigation is complete. At this point, Kaina asked with some surprise, "Did you solve all these things yourselves?" The two of them smiled and said, "These are just basic operations, after all, we are your people." Kaina was relieved to hear that. "You all worked hard. The banquet hall will only make me feel tired. You are the only ones who can guard me." Olivia looked at Princess Kaina's downcast look. Then she whispered in her ear, "Your Highness, I know a place that's much more interesting than this place. Would you like to come with us?"